Hi, everyone. Welcome to Andy's Licorice Talk. This marks our 17th episode with our very special guest, Stephen Williamson. I would highly recommend that you have a pen and paper ready and take some notes. I go back to every one of these. I take notes, and it's amazing how much I learn. And I remind you to please like Andy's Licorice Talk Facebook page and subscribe to its YouTube channel. I'm very happy to announce that Lorenzo is back with us. Last week was the first episode that he missed because actually he had COVID symptoms and had been tested. But I'm very pleased to announce that he tested negative and he's here with us. So Lorenzo, come say hello. Happy to see you nice and healthy and holding my hand throughout this. So anyway, without further ado, we would like to invite our special guest, Stephen Williamson, to join us.
Hey, Andy. Good to see you.
Hi, Steve. Great to see you. So I just have to say two things. Usually I talk about how I know the guests and so forth. And Steve, of course, is an old friend. But this is, in some ways, the most special interview for two reasons. One, I think the first time he heard my name was probably the most embarrassing experience of any of my guests. Apparently, he was doing a freelance gig 20 odd years ago in North Carolina, and my mother went to attend a ballet that he was in the pit, ran there and said, you're a clarinetist, right? You need to buy my son Andy's CD. Okay, so that was, I think, the very first time. And but what makes us really special is, well, along with John Ye earlier, but especially Steve, our fellow colleague, you can say, David Cooper, the new principal horn of the Chicago Symphony, who's come to play many times with our orchestra, the Hong Kong Philharmonic, started or had this series of interviews as well. And he contacted me. He said, Andy, I'm interviewing Steve. Please tell your students, please tune in. And I did. And I really enjoyed the interview. And of course, then he went to interview John Ye, which was a superb interview as well. And Lorenzo was right next to me. I said, boy, I really enjoyed David's interviews. And he said, I think you should do something like this. You know all these guys and, you have the gift of the gab. And it all started with the two promises. One, that we, under the condition that we start with Andrew Mariner, who was Lorenzo's principal in the LSO. And number two, under the condition that I don't talk most of the time. Okay, so we did start with Andrew Mariner. I'd say I'm treading on thin ice on the other one, but we're doing the best we can. So anyway, that was long enough. Stephen, welcome. So great to see you, man.
No, great to be here. And I think you are a natural at this. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's amazing. I guess, I don't know how people figure out whether they're good interviewers until they do something like what you've taken on. I mean, how would you know? But you're really, you're so entertaining. I think it's hard for us as the interviewee because we're like, I can't keep up with this guy. With maybe the exception of John Ye, I don't know who's going to keep up with you, man. It's just funny and it's awesome. So yeah, happy to be here. What time is it there, by the way? I don't even know.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 9:04 p.m.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and we don't have daylight savings time. So we're either half the year we're 13 hours ahead of you, and I guess the other half. It's either 14 or 12. It depends on how good my math is.
Long way to go. Yeah, but you're in primetime performance mode right now. This is man, you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, we chose it actually because it started with Andrew, and we wanted to get Europe in. But then, of course, the West Coast people complain all the time, and the Australians complain because it's sort of midnight for them.
Oh, forget it.
The West Coast is at 6. But you'd be amazed. People write in. They say, I set the alarm clock at 6 o'clock, and my wife's going to divorce me, but it's worth it,
Oh, God bless her. God bless her. Oh, my God. Yeah, of course she's sitting there while you're doing this stuff all the time. Wow. Oh,
man. So, and what actually, I just wanted to say one thing, and not to bring up a bad or a dark subject, but we need to thank you very much. 2 weeks ago, of course, we did an episode, and I just put so much pressure on you. We did a tribute to a really good friend of yours, Jim Anyabin, and of course another friend, Joe Rabai, and you did a really, really good tribute. And I hope some of you, it was on David Schifrin's interview. I hope if you missed it, you go back and see it. But anyway, poor Steve was, I believe, going to the funeral of Jim, and I just kept saying, "You've got to do something." And he says, "Look, I'm driving the funeral. I've got my hands full. I can't promise anything." But I mean, just in the last second, he delivered, and it was really, really touching tribute. So thank you very much for that.
Oh no, my pleasure, and thanks so much for the incredible work you did on that tribute. I mean, it was so professionally done and so beautifully done, and you guys did it right, and I really do appreciate it. We miss them both very much, but it was that was I mean, I had to get there, so I drove, of course, because nobody's really should be flying, and it was 6 hours away, and at the time I made the recording, it said, "Okay, at that moment it said I'm going to arrive about 10 minutes late." And I said, "Oh my God." So I just did it, and I made up the time, obviously, on the highway. So,
wow.
But we do what we have to do. And what you guys did, that was such a beautiful, beautiful tribute. Really.
Again, Lorenzo gets the credit, especially with people, doing things last second. He really did it, and that was wonderful. And it needs to be said, I mean, the only other time we kind of deviated from just the interviews was a little bit of a tribute to Lori Bloom, who had a very tongue-in-cheek, I don't want to say anticlimactic 40 years with the Chicago Symphony, but
horrible. We all wanted to have a huge send-off, and of course, I mean, I'm sure that this is happening, as I've seen, even like with the Philharmonic, people are retiring, and it's like, it's a Zoom chat, and everybody's holding up a glass and wishing you well. I mean, it's not what you would want, but no, Laurie, gosh, what a career he's had. Unbelievable.
So you could say, I mean, the only 2 times we deviated was basically your bass clarinet career. I mean, between Laurie, So anyway, that's great. So guess what? We're going to start talking about you.
Well, that's only the last few minutes. We should be done pretty quick. Nothing to talk about here. Oh, well,
man. This show has been evolving and changing directions. I mean, at first it was just fun between me and friends, and I knew where to go for the stories, and we were trying to avoid the topics. It was an escape. In those days, everyone was sort of in the same boat worldwide, and now we have different things. So now it's actually interesting, I think, to actually get rid of the elephant in the room. It's now September almost. School years are starting. You talk to people. Every school is different. Every university is different. You talk to the symphony guys or gals or whatever, and it's all mayhem. Some people know that they're shut down for a year. Some people are going week to week like we are. So why don't we just start with that? I mean, here you are. It's starting September. Where is the Chicago Symphony? And before I go on, you teach at DePaul University, correct?
Right. Yeah.
And that's basically your only university position. Do I have it right? Or
yes, yeah. I'm only teaching at DePaul, at least here in Chicago for sure. That's it.
Yeah. So let's update. What's the status quo starting in a week till whatever in both of those institutions?
Well, certainly, I know at DePaul, everything, like all ensembles, all classes, as far as I know, are online. And as far as you can have one-on-one lessons, but they have to be held in a gigantic, like, orchestral rehearsal room. I mean, it's a gigantic place. For me, I have six students, and I think I'll have even less this fall, because I think some people, as I totally understand, would opt out if they're not going to have the chamber music and live performance aspect as a performing musician. I mean, I think it's hard to replicate that. We've certainly tried. And I know that with technology, things are getting better. But yeah, so for me, and actually I've had pretty good success of teaching online. I mean, I feel like all of my students are getting better, and that's great. And I mean, actually, I think all of them are fine with me teaching online. So I opted to do that only because it's the safest thing to do. And if I can avoid the for either my student or myself, if we can avoid the possibility of getting COVID, I think that that's the way to go. So that's what I'm doing. And as far as the CSO is concerned, we finally, I think we're right on the cusp of agreeing to, my gosh, the lawyers and everybody have been working to try to get an agreement on how we're going to move forward with COVID. And it looks like starting, I think it'll be I think live streaming will start in October, but I think it's in the second or third week of September, we're going to start to do some recording. But it's chamber groups, because I think we are limited to maybe no more than 8 players on stage. Obviously, socially distanced. Everybody does their COVID test about 2 days before you go into the hall to start rehearsing. And then we're lucky, at least at Orchestra Hall, that there's several large rooms. So we obviously have the stage, but we also have another hall called Buntrock, which is it looks like a giant, I mean, it's like a basketball court. It's huge. And that's another place where groups can rehearse. So I think we'll have 2 or 3 groups simultaneously rehearsing in different areas of the building. And everybody should get the same amount of time on stage before we do our dress rehearsal and performance. Mm-hmm. Again, those will be streamed, not live, but they'll be rebroadcast. I guess starting in October is when stuff is supposed to happen. I know that I'm slated for the first couple weeks because there are lots of string groups, and I mean, they're trying to be equitable across the orchestra. But I think we're going to record with the principal winds. So with Dave Cooper and the other principal winds, we're going to record the Nielsen Quintet and a couple other little showpieces. Like there's a Piazzolla fugue, and then there's a Gershwin 3 preludes arranged for woodwind quintet. And that will be my first week. In the second week of the season, we're going to do the Mozart E-flat Serenade. Oh. For winds. So, I mean, that's all I know so far. We'll get more information, I think, probably by the end of next week, we should know, hopefully, the whole fall schedule. Mm. But at least it's, I mean, at this rate, I mean, we're all chomping at the bit. We are dying to get in there and do something. And for those of us who've tried to do stuff at home, I mean, I finally got all kinds of really great mic equipment and an interface, and I can do stuff like that. It's not the same. I mean, everybody wants to be able to perform with someone else, doing it by yourself. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to hear the clarinet alone at all, ever. So anytime there's something else that adds to, the lonely clarinet playing, I'm all for it. So, yeah.
I have two questions. You said the lawyers were involved. So is that like, in what capacity? Is it like to protect the safety of the players, or to make sure that you're doing work, or what exactly? How does that work?
I mean, to my understanding, which is completely a layperson here, it's my knowledge or my understanding of why the attorneys are there. It's to protect the orchestral players, to also protect the administration as well. I mean, I think they have lawyers on both sides just so that they know it's in lieu of the pandemic. I would imagine, I mean, I can't presume, but I would imagine that if this was not the issue, I don't think that we would need lawyers present to just discuss what our repertoire should be and what should we be playing. But I think it's all for health issues. And I think it's just to make sure that there are no loopholes, or that, somebody also doesn't get overworked. And for me, I don't even understand that, because frankly, we're all dying to play. So it's like, oh my God, we've gone so long without being on stage that the thought of somebody even saying, "Oh, they're going to overwork me. I'm going to play 3 or 4 weeks straight in a row." I don't know. That just doesn't work for me. I've never. I mean, actually, to be honest, I think I have a much different. I've always had a different work ethic coming from the Met, because the Met works so unbelievably hard, and the hours that we put in. For me, part of the joy of going to a symphonic job was like, oh my gosh, I get to see my family. I had no idea. I have 3 kids. I didn't even know that. So I think from my perspective, I guess I had somewhere between 9 and 10 years at the Met. And we worked straight those 9 months. And the crazy thing is, compared to other symphonic positions, the Met, you got 1 week vacation and 5 personal days in the 9 months. And that is unbelievably, every time I tell a symphonic person this, their mind is blown. As you and I both know, when you play in a symphonic orchestra, sometimes there's only 2 clarinets needed, and usually your section helps out. You don't necessarily, if it's a big thing, of course, we all love our positions and we'll play, but sometimes, it's nice to take a week off and you can have your section members, assistant principal play and whatnot. So that does not happen at the Met. I can guarantee you. Everybody's working hard and putting in the time. And my heart goes out to all my colleagues there, with them being furloughed. I mean, I just feel so bad. And I think any opportunity that I hope when we're up and running, and I hope all the orchestras will do what they can to reach out to members of the Met to help them get through this really, really crazy, difficult time financially.
Yeah. Actually, you're better than me at this because you've covered about 10 of my questions.
It'll be 10 minutes. I'll be done. I just won't stop. We just delete and done.
Well, I want to actually ask you a question, and this is probably extremely politically incorrect in this time, according to what you just said. But is there part of you, because there is with me, I mean, we're actually doing video. We did a video of the Grand Partita. Now the principals are now doing recitals and stuff. And I'm actually looking at another way. Of course, I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, for many, many reasons, a symphony orchestra is supposed to be playing symphonies and opera orchestra is supposed to be playing operas. But is there part of you that thinks maybe you look back at this period and say, wow, I got a couple of nice chamber music concerts in the can, so to speak. I've got a couple of nice videos where I'm focusing more on these kinds of ensembles, because I know there definitely is a side to you as a musician that loves the solo stuff, the chamber music stuff, and now you have a little more time and you're going to really focus on that, and they're going to document that in video. I mean, is there actually some kind of very odd silver lining in that side to things?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we're all. What I have thought that we talked about this before in not you and I, but the members of the Woodwind Quintet, and I think I could be wrong, and I know that John Ye and Lori and Greg would know exactly what the history is. But when I went back and looked to see how many times did the principal winds of the CSO actually get together and do a chamber concert, I mean, I think it was back in the Reiner days, and maybe once or twice under Schulte.
Wow.
But yeah, it wasn't a thing that they did. And I mean, I know that there were a lot of personality conflicts, but we're lucky right now. I mean, we're all relatively. I mean, I'm the old guy. I'm the old guy of the principal winds. It's kind of, I don't like that, but that's the truth. And I'm happy that everybody is so amenable, and they have great enthusiasm and a desire to get the quintet together. And let's get, and we're talking about other repertoire. Let's do other things. And it's not even to record. It's to just get to know each other's playing even better, which of course helps us in the orchestra, as we all know. But there is a silver lining for sure. I mean, I think if I didn't have some of these chamber music opportunities in front of me, I mean, I would be searching for something else. I know I would be contacting other. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, when we heard that the subscription season had been shut down through December, I thought, oh well, I guess what do we do? You know, we're just going to sit around and do nothing. I mean, we can't do that. We have to do something. So everybody was trying to figure out how they could record with somebody else, virtually, and we tried it, and it doesn't, at least we haven't found a way to make it work really, really well. It's nothing compares to being in the same room. But now that we've got this option, everybody seems really, really excited about it. And what I'm happy to say is that I'm not hearing the jadedness that we know is out there and has been in the past of, well, I hope they don't make me play more than 60 minutes because, I don't want to be taken advantage of. And we're not getting that. And I love that. At least from the colleagues that I've spoken to in the orchestra, that we're so grateful. First of all, we're grateful that we're being paid, in any capacity, and we're grateful that that we actually have a very good relationship right now with our administration and the board of trustees. Stuff like that is so priceless. I mean, you can't put a price tag on it. So when you feel that you are being respected and valued, it's amazing what you can do as an ensemble. I feel like we're going to bring our A game. My goal is not to squeak. So I think if I don't squeak, we should be okay. That's all I can do at this moment.
Well, no, but that's really very profound words. I mean, because I obviously not just you, but the CSO has had shakier moments sometimes with the administration stuff. But isn't that interesting? I mean, that actually, when everyone's working together, the product gains, and the consumers, so to speak, gains, and it sounds like that's a very, very wonderful discovery.
Yeah,
from that. So let's keep on going in this direction. I finally forgave you and John Ye for stealing our principal trumpeter. Okay.
Okay. Oh, well, at least you finally forgave us. I mean, I didn't know that they would. It's documented. I know I can go back and re-listen to this video, and you've said it, so I feel better. I can speak now. Thank you.
So,
no, he's great. We love Esteban. He's fantastic. He's got, like I said, it's not just obviously the principal wins. I mean, it's all of the new members coming into the orchestra. And, it's a family, and when you bring somebody in who's new, you want them to feel welcomed. You want them to do their best through the probationary period till you receive tenure, and you want to always feel that it's a safe place. So Esteban is, this freak of nature. I mean, I just what the man can do on that instrument. It's clearly he was born to play the trumpet. He's astounding to listen to, and what I like is that in a way, his playing starts to challenge the other sections to hey, we better. We have a great tradition in the Chicago Symphony. There's no doubt about it. But every person matters. Every single person makes a difference. And obviously, in the principal chairs, there may be more of a spotlight on them. But what I love about his playing is that it's not just those incredible, grandiose moments that the trumpet can have in an orchestra. It's also the tutti playing, the ensemble playing, the listening across the orchestra, and being a part of a greater, something greater than yourself. This unified entity that has a common goal. I mean, he's such a team player, and he's just the sweetest guy. So I mean, like, I know, I'm sorry. It
Well,
could be cloned. I mean, if he could be cloned and be in many, many orchestras, everybody would take him. So I know I'm sure you miss him and his sweet demeanor and his great playing. But yeah.
well, we do. But what was interesting about it is we our music director Jaap van Sweden is also in the New York Phil. So Jaap it always talks about keeping score. So in a way, he stole Chris Martin from you. And then I remember at Esteban's audition, he said, "I'm terrified that Ricardo won't talk to me anymore if he's saying Hanka." So now they're kind of even. But David Cooper, of course, was in Dallas with Jaap, so it's kind of like But I know he's keeping score.
I think all these conductors. I mean, conductors are a different breed. We all know this, and I think they all do keep score in some way. Some will admit it, and others will just, passively, have that little black book, and they'll mark their own little notes as their career goes on and on. But yeah, I mean, look, what are you going to do? It's a wonderful thing, I'm sure, for both Chris Martin and for Esteban to be sought after. I mean, they're obviously fantastic. I love them both, and they're both. I mean, we're just very lucky. I'm very lucky to have had time with Chris on stage. I'm also super lucky to have Esteban at this time. So, it's a whole new chapter, but I think the orchestra, I mean, I hate the audition process. I don't think anybody likes the audition process, but so far it seems to be working. And I like the fact that if we're not satisfied, okay, and then Chicago's infamous for this. They'll wait forever till they figure out what they want. And it probably sometimes doesn't even have a bearing on the auditionees at times. I mean, I hate that part of it. It's like somebody could come in and just play their pants off and it's just amazing what they did. But the committee might not be might not be sure of what they're really listening for. And it's a process. It takes time, especially when you're dealing with positions that have been, people have been in some of these positions 40, 50, 60 years. It's insane how the longevity of some of these musicians and the legacy that we're trying to now fill. Like, so, I don't know how many horn auditions we had before Dave won the job. At least 4, maybe 5. I don't even remember. I stopped counting after a while. But it is we're lucky. We are lucky that we know that if we wait, whether it's our fault or the auditionee's fault, we're gonna finally get something. Just sooner the better, though. I hate waiting, but that's how.
So this takes me to the next sort of level of what we're talking about. So in our case, obviously, we're out of principal trumpet. In your case, we're just discussing you're out of bass clarinet.
Right.
God, what else? So I know for us, especially, we have very strong emigration laws right now. So we're kind of crippled on that. So what's going on there? I mean, do you have openings? Are you having auditions? How do you cope with this? What's going on that side to the orchestra?
Well, I mean, what's tough is that there's several positions already open that have been advertised and auditions were scheduled, and then COVID hit. So principal viola, and I think there may be, I could be wrong, 1 or 2 other positions in the viola section positions too. So we also have this, it goes hand in hand with Maestro Muti's contract. He now will only do 1 audition during his time that he is, 1 or 2, 3 weeks, however long he's in Chicago before he's gone. So we can't piggyback a bunch of auditions. Even if he's there for 3 weeks, he's going to hear 1 audition
right
that time frame. And because of that, it really throws us back. And also because of COVID, I think the whole strategy needs to be rethought, to be honest. I mean, how do you, I think people are going to, there might have to be pre-screening of just audio recordings. And then, you just have to trust that people are being they're not cheating the system and calling up Ricardo Morales and making a recording for them. You know what I mean? It's like hopefully everybody's taking their own auditions, but because I think if it's video, then you're seeing who the person is. So you can't have a video audition.
I see. Right. I didn't even think about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a screen would be okay. It's got to be an audio.
Interesting.
I guess, but and then here's the other thing that everybody says. Well, yeah, but the acoustic of that person's recording. Yes. How are they going to sound in our hall? And oh my God. So look, in a perfect world, as we all know, you want to hear the auditionees on stage with a screen, and you want to be as relatively as far back away, so you get a perspective of how they play and fill the hall and use the hall to their advantage. But I think that is not going to happen for a while. And I think even if we do have auditions, I know for a fact that, well, there's viola, we had an assistant principal flute audition, but nobody won. And so that's going to happen again. So the bass clarinet audition is going to have to be after maybe 2 or 3 other positions that have already been advertised. And I think what we're looking at this year is we're probably, I say this year, God, we're not talking till January. If we're lucky and the orchestra is going to be back on stage, and then we're going to start. This is all so hypothetical. Everybody's preparing for the worst case scenario, which is that nothing is going to happen, that COVID is getting worse, and we're gonna be scaling back rather than getting into the hall. But if we are, I know that we will be inviting bass clarinetists, if there's a bass clarinet position part, to give people an opportunity to come and play with the orchestra. And I don't think there will be an audition for at least another year. I would think that the following season in the beginning will be wet, or I don't know if we ever hold them in the summer. Probably not, because the maestro has to be present and he's not with us in the summertime. So it'll have to be probably next season. The beginning of next season, we would probably have the bass clarinet audition.
So it sounds exactly just everything's up in the air.
Is that how it is for you guys? Because you said you have to deal with immigration and all kinds of things on top.
Well, no, it's actually interesting listening to you, because for us it's clear. At least, actually, the side of the hall. In recent years, I don't know how this happened or what. It's really up to the government. So the government says the numbers are such, all the halls are closed, the government halls, which are the major concert halls, and that's it. And we're at the mercy of that. So it's very clear. They're going to tell us it's open now. Then when that happens, we present case scenarios that they can accept. So, for example, there was that Berlin plan. We even went into Australia. Some of the Australian orchestras came up with their own plan. They come in and we say, okay, how about this is a maximum amount of people on stage, X amount of screens, X amount of people wearing masks, X amount of this. And they say, no. And they say, okay, well, how about this? We'll cut it down by 10 players. And they say, yeah, okay. And then that's great for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden the numbers spike. They say, okay, the halls are closed for a month. And, and that's what you do. But at least we understand who has the power and at what level. So I'm curious with you, like you say, like what you're talking about, well, best case scenario, worst case scenario, if the hall opens, who's deciding that? Who decides, yeah, okay, the hall's open, you're doing concerts?
Yeah, I think that's decided first and foremost by the governor of Illinois.
Oh, okay.
And then the mayor. So there's a team apparently there's a medical professional who is basically giving the governor her recommendations on how things should go and advising the governor. Then that person is also in Chicago with the mayor, working with our orchestral administration and representatives from the orchestra and the board. So everybody's like on this sort of like COVID team. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure, the crazy thing is, I'm not even affiliated with any of that stuff. And when I get an email that says, "Oh my gosh, this email looks pretty much just like what we saw about 2 months ago. What is happening?" But I know that they're doing everything they can. And the truth is, as the numbers change and as things spike or as things improve, you still get a false sense of security, and you don't know how long this is going to continue. We always hope it will, but I think they're just constantly backpedaling and going with the tide and trying to figure out how do we find some stability in all this. So I think at first we heard that only musicians who could wear masks, no more than 5, were going to be allowed on stage. So then I thought, well, I'm out. It's just going to be strings and harp and percussionists. So, all right, hope that sounds good. And I don't really know what they're going to do, and that's limiting. I mean, there's a lot of repertoire for strings. We all know that, but it's also putting a whole workload only on the string musicians in the orchestra. So that's crazy. And then about 2 weeks later, we heard, we were asked, "Oh, would you guys like to do a woodwind quintet?" And I'm like, "Wait, I thought we have to all have masks on." And well, no, things are, if you're spread out, there's all these studies coming out. I'm like, oh my God, look. So I mean, at this rate, this is what we're planning on doing. If it happens, awesome. But if not, then okay, at least we'll see. I don't know. I won't believe it until I'm in the hall actually doing something.
I'm with you. I'm with you in that. So you hear people talk about the silver lining earlier on. You talk about what they've been doing, what they haven't been doing. But now we're further along, and I'm actually interested now. 4 or 5 months into this kind of series and everything. So has this actually changed you at all? Do you think as a person?
But yeah, I mean, I was never a germaphobe. My wife is a germaphobe, and now it's like I'm constantly thinking about, wait, did I just touch that, or where did that come from? And so, I mean, I think I'm just constantly bathing in Purell and whatever. So, I mean, in that respect, yes, I'm thinking more along health lines in a way that I never ever thought about before. But as far as being a musician, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we're all, that elephant is still in the room. We're always a little bit concerned about, are we going to have an audience when we come back? Who's going to be willing to come into the hall? All of those issues are, I mean, so orchestras like Berlin and Vienna, who have already sort of set up these incredible, digital concert halls where you're able to, you can just record anything you want and stream it live. And, whether there's an audience in the hall or not, I mean, that's a blessing for the world, so they get a chance to hear these great musicians perform on a regular basis. We're not set up for that, and I hope that we do. I mean, if there's a silver lining, it's that, this is a pandemic, and it's horrible, and it's so devastating what's happening around the world. But if we're going to look to the future, we should be having digital concert halls just like Berlin, and they're way ahead of the game. And I mean, I really think that that's the investment that needs to happen, because this is one virus. I mean, what else is out there? What's going to happen next? We want to stay positive, but we also need to, we need to plan ahead. So I think that everybody's taken a huge hit, the arts especially. And I think, I pinch myself because I'm very lucky that this administration is doing a fantastic job of providing for us and caring about its musicians, when I know other orchestras are not as lucky. And on top of it, to think of all the fellow freelance musicians that we know, that just breaks my heart. So I mean, I know a lot of people are contemplating new careers, different, avenues, and, I don't know what else I can do. So I want to believe that being a musician is still going to have as much, hopefully more of an impact on society I think people are really going to be, I think they already are. I think they're desperate and starving for music to enrich their lives. So I hope we can get back in the hall. I mean, I don't know.
I just want to say Esteban just got on and commented. I don't know if he just got on, but don't go back and listen to the beginning, Esteban, because we were just saying such terrible things about you. So don't do that.
Oh my God! Hey, Esteban.
And of course, John Ye, who's the most loyal commenter ever, is on here, and of course Charlie Neidig and Ayako and whatnot. There's always people coming on, and you'll see all the people later on. So what I want to ask you is, I mean, I feel this too. I mean, do you ever feel now that there's things that you took for granted, a year ago? And equally, I've been thinking about this too. If things get more normal or whatever that is or is going to be, are there things now that we're going to be taking for granted then? I mean, I'll just throw out an example. Like, I know at one point you were having more time with your family. Okay, maybe you actually start getting used to that, and maybe should things, let's say in 2 years, you might look back and say, yeah, I could have spent even more time with them then, or I could have done this or whatever. So do you feel on both sides there's things that you've taken for granted in the past, and things that maybe now are not so bad, but you're like, oh man, I really squandered that opportunity to do something. I could have done that better.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, like, I think one of the things that obviously trying to navigate as a parent is something that navigate how to help your kids get through this when you yourself are struggling. So, and the same, it goes to how I would work with my students. I mean, I want to give them so much more positivity, and I don't want them to live in a bubble. So, I mean, it's difficult enough to try to be a musician and to try to have a career and thrive financially as a musician. I mean, we didn't get into this for the money. We all know that it's not about the money. So, I mean, but to put food on the table and stuff like that, and to do what you love. I mean, I think that's what we all aspired to do from the beginning. It's like, but when you're young, the sky's the limit, and you just, you really want to jump out there and go for everything, which I want to encourage all my students and my own children to do. But also, as we get older, I don't know if it's more conservative or, we're become more aware. It's the same thing. It's like every time I try to play the Mozart concerto, it's like, oh my God, this gets harder every time. Why can't I just be that 18-year-old kid that just picked up the clarinet and like, what's so hard about this thing? This is easy. It's not like that technical. And, so, wisdom has its consequences. It has its blessings too. But I think for me as a parent, I'm learning to, savor every moment I have with the kids. Now, the truth is they're back in school now, but they're not in the school. They're online. I mean, we chose to keep our kids online. We had the option and we're like, no way. So I'm also trying to give them their space. We're all in this house together, and everybody's got their own room with their own camera and their own, whatever setup that they've got to do to be educated and be in the classroom virtually. So, now I have less to do. And they're in school. So like while they're in school, I'm like, well, I guess I better practice, or maybe I'll go work out or something. And, but I am thinking about myself too, as well, health-wise. And I don't even think John knows this. He might've heard through the grapevine, but he knows that I've been struggling. I had a gym injury and I fell a couple of years ago on my right shoulder. And I've got 2 major rotator cuff tears. So I'm going to have surgery done. Oh. And I'm not excited about it, because you would think with technology today, because it's laparoscopic, that, well, shoot, you should be back in the saddle in a month or two, and they're saying minimum 3 months before I'll be able to actually play. I'm not looking forward to that. It's already, I feel like I'm isolated enough. So now I'm going to have to just keep this arm isolated for about 6 weeks. And then, but I try to, as we all do, we're trying to I'm talking to the doctor about it, saying, if my arm's in this position, I mean, that's how I hold the clarinet. So I should be fine, right? I can move my fingers, right? Yeah. He's like, well, you'll see how you feel, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to want to be doing anything. So that's another thing that honestly I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have done if there wasn't COVID right now, because I kept pushing myself saying, yeah, it doesn't feel good.
Yep.
I'm not trilling as fast as I can with my right hand. So I'm switching stuff over with my left hand. And I'm compromising my playing because of this injury. So at least now I know I'm going to get something done. So that's what I'm going to do those first 2 weeks. And then I'm going to have the surgery at the end of September. And then I'll be teaching a lot, demonstrating with left hand, clarinet for the left hand.
Yeah, didn't write a piece like that? Oh wait,
somebody's gonna have to. Yeah, right. Let's get something. Let's go for the left hand.
Yeah. It's very interesting. No, but that actually sounds like a really great idea. I mean, sorry, I know it's not something to look for, but a great way to use that time and so yeah, maybe you will look back and realize you did it great. Now, speaking of your family and videos and all this kind of stuff, and speaking of trills, didn't you guys have a quite a successful Rhapsody in Blue?
Yeah.
How many views did you get on that?
Oh my God! Somebody said. I mean, I stopped counting. It was like 2.5 million views.
Okay,
I mean, it blows my mind.
Now listen, I saw it. My heart was warmed. It was very nice glissando at the beginning. By the way, it just reminded me because I'm not sure. I think you were using weird fingerings for trills or something.
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yeah. So, I do. I don't. It's funny that I'm talking about my right shoulder. I'm right-handed. So of course I like right-handed trills better. But I've always done that G sharp trill, which is our pinky finger. I always reach over and use my right hand, because I can, and honestly, it's smoke and mirrors, and I've done this a lot too in auditions. Capriccio Español, you get into the B flat excerpt, I don't do the G to A natural trill that we've all been taught to do because I hate my left hand. So I use my right hand. I'll reach over and I'll either cover the tone hole or I'll use S1, the bottom side key. And It's a pianissimo trill. And the funny thing is, clarinetists get all hung up on this stuff and they're like, dude, you didn't use a real trill. And I'm like, yeah, but let's be honest, on an audition committee, how many clarinetists are actually there? And most of them aren't, flute players, oboes, bassoons. And they don't care. If it sounds good, it's good. And, so I think sometimes we get so caught up in how to be clarinetists that we tend to forget to get outside of the box. And I know that you've had experience with Charlie and Ayako, and I learned so much about how to play out of the box because of them. I mean, they would be the first people to say, well, why are you doing it? Why is there only one way to do something? I mean, they're the first people to say, well, turn the clarinet upside down and go underwater and make some music, figure something out. And that was, I remember Charlie telling me once, he's like, it blew my mind because I was like, he said, you really only have two sounds. I'm like, what? He said, yeah, you either play loud or you play really soft. There's nothing in between. He said, you're just very Aristotelian about how you play the clarinet. And I'm like, I felt like I was just going to crawl out of the room like, oh my God, I can't take this. And I remember thinking, damn, he's actually right, because there were so many other colors and palettes and ways to play the clarinet that, I think we get stuck in, as I did. I was stuck in an Aristotelian way. This is one way to sound great on the clarinet. And that's totally not who I am. But I think at that time I thought I needed to be. When I realized that I didn't need to fit into some sort of a, cookie cutter version of, this is an American clarinetist and this is how we sound, which is why I went to Germany, which is why I tried to do as much internationally as possible, because I think that there's so many great clarinet players out there. There's so many completely different versions of how the clarinet should and could sound that who am I to say there's only one way? I would never do that. So he helped me, because he basically gave me a big kick in the rear end, because he's like, you're better than this. You should do better than this. And you shouldn't just think that there's one way to play the clarinet. And he's absolutely right. I'm so grateful I had time with him. And
Charlie had a birthday just a couple of days ago, so we just wish him many happy
birthday, Charlie. That's right. That's right. You're right. Yeah, no, he's fantastic. And I try to, as much as I can, to catch his. He does these live streams on Friday mornings, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Friday mornings, and they're always fascinating. I mean, he's just a brilliant man.
It's actually the reason we moved. We were Friday, and he was the second interview. He says, "No, I do my thing. It's okay," and we've stayed here ever since. Out of respect for his couple of hours.
I know. It's funny because he'll have a seminar. I think he just did one on the Nielsen Concerto, and I'm like, oh my God, I thought I was getting it. I thought I was getting somewhere with this concerto, and then he'll talk about it and demonstrate, and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty much a novice. I feel like a novice right now, but he inspires me. He's always inspired me. Both Ayako and Charlie are just wonderful. So anyway, that if it wasn't for them, I don't think that I would have pursued as much chamber music and solo.
By the way, I don't know if you. Unfortunately, I don't have but there's a poster right back there. That Charlie is on. We did like a double thing like 30 years ago or something.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A 30-year-old Charlie Nighting or a 32-year-old Charlie Nighting or something, but we won't embarrass him with.
Oh no, that's so cool. I love that you've got those up there. That's great.
Yeah,
memories for sure.
But Steve, go back. I mean, what I want to know. I mean, you hear this week. Sometimes you see a corny TV show, and someone says, not that your video was corny, but why was the Brady Bunch so famous?
Oh God. You mean with the Gershwin recording?
That would attract 2.5 million people to this family video. What do you think it was?
We were stunned that it went viral, because at first we were like, it was just, we had been asked. It was right when COVID hit. I think it was literally the week after the orchestra, we went dark at Orchestra Hall. And the following week, and we were supposed to play Rhapsody in Blue that week. So, it's something obviously I've been practicing. And my oldest son came in and I got an email or a text message from our videographer and photographer of the orchestra, Todd Rosenberg. He's amazing. And he said, hey, we need something. We need something now. Like, can you guys get together and make something? And I said, I don't know. Then my son Ryan said, hey, Dad, I found an arrangement of Rhapsody in Blue for a brass quintet. And then I didn't think it was going to, it was literally that day. Then Jill walks in and she said, okay, everybody get into the living room. We're going to record this. And at that moment, my youngest son, Matthew, is a tuba player. Now, look, he doesn't practice the tuba. He's very good, but he does not practice the tuba. It's just a thing that he happens to do very well. But he said he saw the music and he'd never seen. So he thought we had to record the whole piece. It was like 3 pages. And he literally grabbed his tuba and ran downstairs into the basement and locked the door because he didn't want anybody to get him out of the room. He thought he was panicking and we're banging on the door. He said, Matthew, we're only going to play the first 26 measures. And he goes, oh my God. You hear the click of the door. He opens it. He goes, okay, we could do this. So then he went upstairs and we all got into the living room. We moved the table out of our dining room, sorry, not living room. and set up the camera. We have one of those. Actually, we did with the iPhone. So I mean, we have one of those plug-in mics to the iPhone. I mean, back then, we in the very beginning of this, we had no equipment that we do now. Nobody thought that we would. Who wants to hear yourself digitally compressed and all that? So everybody has some sort of a smartphone, and we know how we sound on those things. It's depressing, but for some reason, the room is very good. So the room has a nice resonance to it. So we took a few takes, and my favorite take was one right before that one, but our cat ran through the living room right in between us, and we had just finished, and Matthew's like, "Oh, look, hi, Ruby," and I was supposed to start talking about, thank you so much, we're happy to play this for you, but so my wife's like, "No, you can't take that take, that's horrible." I'm like, "Oh man, that was the best clip I had." So we took the second one. But it was great, I mean, it's so much. But I have to say, my son has moved on from the tuba. He's really into musical theater. So we brought the tuba back to the school. He's starting his freshman year now in high school. So the tuba is a thing of the past. So we're gonna, I don't know what we're gonna do as a family, but who knows? He could pick up anything and play it. He's fine. But we haven't done anything since then. I mean, it's amazing. We always thought that we were gonna do more. But everybody got into their own thing, and I think that's kind of what happens during this pandemic. Everybody's got to do what makes them feel, relatively normal. But yeah, we can't believe how that thing went viral. We got phone calls from all kinds of television stations, and out on somebody post some I don't know which talk show host had put it on their show. Out on the West Coast. I had no idea. I mean, all this stuff, other than a voyeur on Facebook, I don't really know what's going on in the world. I mean, I obviously watch the news, but that gets depressing. So I'm not socially up to speed. So, I was getting emails from people saying, "I just saw you guys on television." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And this thing just went off. It went off the charts. So amazing. I don't know why, but I think it was cool because it showed family unity, and I'm proud of my kids, and they sound great, and it was a fun thing that just happened. So maybe that's why it wasn't really planned out, because when you plan, sometimes you take the life out of something when you try too hard. We were just having fun.
Yeah, amazing. Well, so speaking of that, and you've mentioned already your students. All my questions are growing heads here, but I know your oldest son is actually quite a serious. He's a Juilliard student, right? A horn player. Yep. Yeah. So quite a serious musician, right in that awful sweet spot, sour spot right now of COVID. And you actually are the first person who's actually verbalized what I'm thinking, or put it so succinctly. We're scared. Those of us who are reasonably established and been doing this for how many decades, what do you tell the 20-year-olds who, so, that's already another, forget your students. We'll get to that. But even, here you have your son, and you're blatantly speaking in front of thousands of people about this. What do you tell him? Does he get down? But actually, before we go on, I just want to mention something. And I want your experience. Even people can write in. I just did one of these Zoom panels with Lorenzo and Ayako and stuff. They were talking about teaching online and stuff. And someone said, "Well, how are you keeping your students inspired and stuff?" And actually, I really thought about it. In the last few months, I haven't found any student who's like, "Oh, I don't know what to do about next year." They're doing the summer festivals online. They're taking lessons. They're like, "Okay, we're practicing." My personal experience with the case sampling of dozens, let's say, worldwide, not one time has someone said, "Oh, I'm just so depressed. I just don't think I can practice." But plenty of professionals I've heard talk like that. They're teachers. So first of all, just yay or nay. Is that your experience also? And B, if that's not your experience, how do you talk to your son when he's talking about Juilliard and the future when you're sitting here not even knowing when the next time you're going to be on stage or the net or the Met is furloughed and stuff. It's hard enough to get into the Met, but so what are you sharing with your students, your son, and also do you find what I'm saying to be actually reasonably accurate with your experience about a lot of the young people so far? They seem to just business as usual, doing the best they can.
Yeah, I think, I mean, he certainly knows that, I personally, we all have struggled, but he also, he's heard me say, gosh, I want to believe that we're going to get through this. I want to believe that music, that the value of music and the enrichment of the human spirit and all the things that we know it does will be even more important after. Hopefully, after a vaccine is created and this virus is eradicated. But I know, excuse me, I know that I'll say it, and maybe it's because I've always said it. Once you get a job, you're not supposed to stop wanting to be better. And I think that once every job that I've had the fortune of winning, I've always felt like, oh my God, the pressure is even greater now on me. I've got to actually deliver every day, and I want my children as well as my students to know that what's good for me yesterday is unacceptable for me today. That I'm always going to try to be better than I was the day before. Having said that, I'm also very, very inspired by my students. So when I've never faced anything like this. I don't think anybody in our generation has faced a pandemic like this now. And I think it is easy to just, cry ourselves a river and get all down and say, well, I'm not gonna put the time in today because what's the point, right? And I don't want to be like that. I know I'm not going to be that way. But when I teach my students, and they come in and some of them are just blowing my mind away with what they're doing and how prepared they are and how well they're playing. And you see how excited they are that they're actually getting better. And they hear it immediately. And sometimes it's that light bulb and you're just like, hey, what if you try this? And all of a sudden everything just falls into place. And you go, okay, if they're putting in the time, I got to put in the time too. I can't just sit back and expect that people who are privileged enough to have an orchestral job and sit back and if we're lucky enough to be paid during this pandemic for not producing anything, we're not, we're trying, but it's not the same, that we need to step up. And so I am inspired by the younger generation today. Also, something that my son is doing is equally inspiring. He and several students, some are at Juilliard, some are at Yale, some are at Curtis. I think there, it's a whole plethora, and not necessarily all of them are performance majors or music majors, but I think they're all in the arts in some way. They got together, and they have meetings almost every other night a week since the beginning of the pandemic. Sometimes 2 to 4 hour sessions where they're talking about the racial unrest, the social injustices that are happening in our country, as well as in the actual business itself of orchestras and other fine arts institutions, the inequitability. So I'm so proud of him for the work that he's doing, and they're reaching out. They're calling other institutions, and they're not going to the CEOs. They're going to lower administrative positions, learning how they can reach them and how they can learn how to speak to the younger generation and how to keep this art form alive, where everybody feels they have a voice. So everything from audition protocol to what really makes an orchestra diverse, so and programming, diverse programming, and how many other cultures Did I lose you?
No.
Oh, I lost you on the screen. Oh, I got you back. There we go. Sorry. My desktop is embarrassing because my son he's a gamer, so he plays like Fortnite and all this stuff on this thing. And every time I come to my computer, I'm afraid it's going to blow up because I don't think it can hold all the stuff that he puts in this thing. But anyway, back to my talk. I'm very, very inspired by not only what my son is doing, but my students. They're all. It's not just what they're doing as practicing their instrument. They're researching, they're reading, they're going to podcasts, they're trying to learn as much as they can about the current state of affairs. And, I know that I probably wouldn't be that way right now if it wasn't for them. I think everybody's eyes and ears are being opened by what's happening around us. But I know that, my typical day would be get up, see the kids, have my practice session, get to work. I'm focusing on that week's program, right? So, I mean, this is what we do as symphonic musicians. Or I'm thinking about, okay, there's a big thing in 2 weeks. I got to work on this. Everything stopped, right? And it stopped for a reason because I feel like, yes, we have to do it for health reasons. But, the silver lining is let's look within inside ourselves. Let's try to, ask those difficult questions of like, gosh, how was I raised? Were there racial prejudices for me being white privilege and X, Y, and Z? Some things went right over my head and I wasn't even aware of it. And I think if we hadn't had some of these horrible atrocities and tragedies happen in this country, I don't think I would know, or I certainly wouldn't have given it as much thought. Black Lives Matter, it is absolutely in the forefront of my mind now. And I think about it every day, all the time. I don't think I would have been that way before. I certainly always wanted to feel like I was a person who was very fair and didn't have prejudice. But I'm aware of things that I would never have been aware of before. And I think because it's a common thread and everybody's hopefully willing to listen and reevaluate where they grew up and how they grew up. And maybe, it's been enlightening for me. So, and because of my son, I mean, we have long talks at night where he's telling me things and, he's not pointing the finger at me because he's a really good, he knows how to speak to an older generation who, in a way that makes me want to listen, and I think there's an art to that. And I think that's what this whole organization that he's a part of is trying to teach us how to be better listeners and for them to learn how to converse and get a real conversation going back and forth. So anyway, stuff like that has really been enlightening for me.
Very nice. Now, I want to talk about, you mentioned, your past jobs and stuff like that. So in my impression, right, it seems like the three major periods of your professional life was Chicago Symphony, the Met Opera Orchestra, and freelancing in New York. Would you say I basically have it right?
Yeah, I mean, I also had a year where I won the principal of the New York Philharmonic, and that was a trial year for me. I signed a contract that I was going to, I got a leave of absence from Maestro Muti, and, it was an opportunity for me to test drive a Ferrari versus a Lamborghini. I mean, they're both great orchestras. So it was an opportunity for me to figure out, did I want to be in that orchestra and I had the option of going back to Chicago. So I was in a very, very privileged position to make that decision. And that was not very many people get these opportunities. So I really I was very grateful to Maestro Muti for giving me the opportunity to really make an educated, proper decision, artistic decision for myself. But there comes consequences. I mean, I have a family that I love, and to be moving back and forth like we did is extremely strenuous and tough on everybody. So it could not have been done without my wife, who is just the consummate nurturer and mother and also a great musician. So she's a fantastic French horn player that I learned so much. Actually, I never really did orchestral. You know how all our students right now are still, thank goodness, doing online festivals and stuff in the summertime. I didn't do any of those. I didn't do an orchestral festival ever. I just did chamber music festivals because when I was a freshman at Eastman, my wife and I, well, at the time, girlfriend and I, actually, yes, we were dating by the time we started this group. We started a group in like December of our freshman year, and we stayed together, a woodwind quintet that I learned so much in that group that it was invaluable, the amount of the skill sets that I, not just about how to play with other instruments, but how to become a better human being and not a, I mean, I was very, very opinionated and judgmental. And at that time, things would just fly out of my mouth in the middle of rehearsal. And God bless these beautiful people that were tolerant of me, because I think they knew it all came from a good place, but I just had no filter. So I had to learn how to have a filter. And that group really taught me some very, very important social skills about how to become a team player and an orchestral citizen. So that's what we did. And this group, we stayed together for, God, over 20 some odd years. And we went on to win Concert Artist Guild. We were the first like woodwind quintet that they ever had. And we were the first undergraduate quintet at Yale's Norfolk Chamber Music Festival. And so these experiences that I had with this group are priceless. And it's funny, just yesterday, I have a tape deck, right? So that's dating myself, but it broke. So I got another one because I found all these tapes from performances with my woodwind quintet, and we put them in, and oh my gosh, it was so fun. It's just great to know that when you click with other individuals and you have an opportunity to make great chamber music like that, it's one of the greatest gifts you could be given.
So don't forget to convert those tapes, okay? Because
I got a converter too. I just got a converter, so I'm going to try it.
Because this is one of my COVID projects that I just can't bring myself to do. It's just I've got just so many tapes from my background, and some are pricey. I mean, they're lessons with Leon Rushinoff, who's been dead for 25, and I need to go through all these things, and I know every month I wait, there's going to be another one that snaps or something when I do it. So I'm glad.
I'm worried about it. I know. I put this tape in and I started listening, and I could tell, like, wait, it sounds a little warbly. I'm like, okay, take the tape out and wait for that moment to convert it so you don't ruin this thing. Because yeah, I mean, this stuff is priceless, and I mean, we don't have, it's a new era now, right? So everything's digital. But, there is something to be said for hearing some of these other ways of listening to music, like LPs and 76s. And you go back and you hear like a different form of resonance, right? Because I think today, digitally, everything gets compressed and then people add reverb to it. So it's not a true sense of how somebody really sounds, right? And we're trying so hard to keep that tradition going. Of no. What is it? The hertz. You got to feel that vibration in your head. Your whole body needs to be like feeling this resonance as you play. And sometimes you can hear that in those older recordings, and I miss that. So yes, I will convert these. That is my job. That's going to be my job when my shoulder's out. I'm going to be just. I'm going to be, re-recording burning everything I can into the computer and getting it into a format that won't be tainted again.
So let's go back to the other than your year in the New York Phil, and I'm going to call that a variation of the Chicago Symphony. First of all, how many years were you in the Met? How many years were you freelancing? How many years have you been in Chicago/New York Phil?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I got out of Juilliard for my master's in '95. So starting from 95, 96, was freelancing in New York. And I won some other smaller regional jobs around 2000, I think, or around then, just as my first child was born. So I got I won the second clarinet position at American Ballet Theater. So I was playing with John Manassi for a few seasons, and then I won a Northeastern Pennsylvania Philharmonic, and then there are other orchestras in town, like, or out of town, Stanford Symphony, and then there were some awesome groups that I was so privileged. A good dear friend of mine and fantastic clarinetist that you know as well, Todd Levy, was in town, and he was looking for a second clarinet. I mean, he was always in town, but he was looking for a second clarinetist, and he basically gave me a big break. I went and played some duets for him, and next thing you know, and I had just won a City Opera national tour audition, so I was going to go out on the road with City Opera back when they had national tours, and it was
back when they had City Opera.
Back when they had City Opera, exactly. I mean, it's just so tragic, God. So at that time, they were going to do maybe 3 or 4 months on the road, and I was like, oh my God, I'm set. You know, when you're a freelancer and you get something that's relatively stable for the whatever time period, you're jumping for joy, man. It's like great. And I had already had a couple rehearsals with them, and I somehow got in touch with Todd Levy, who asked if I could come over to his apartment and play some duets with him. I'm like, fine, yeah. I said, you know, I just won this job, but I'm going to be out of town for like 4 months. And he looked at me and goes, no, don't do that. And I said, dude, it's like money. It's like I've got something, I got a paycheck. And he said, I promise you, if you don't take that, I will guarantee you even more money working with me, and I'll bring you into all these other orchestras as my second clarinetist. I went, really? I mean, I'm just going to say goodbye to this opportunity? And he said, trust me. And I said, and I did. I trusted him, and he took amazing care of me. I started subbing in orchestras. There was a group called EOS, which was a fantastic chamber orchestra that conductor Jonathan Sheffer founded. Back then, they were recording all kinds of, you know, it was a fantastic, some of the best freelancers in the city were in this group, and he just brought me in. I was like, oh my God. When Todd won Milwaukee, all these positions opened, and I think because of his guidance, he was able, you know, some were, you know, I was getting the first call, and then some I actually auditioned for and was lucky enough to win. So that started my freelance career in New York. And I started, once Todd left for Milwaukee, I felt like, okay, and he subbed a lot at the Met. I didn't want to ever, I didn't feel good enough, and I never felt like I could go play for Ricardo Morales. But when Todd left, he said, okay, you need to go play for Ricardo. And I said, okay, I got really nervous. I said, okay, fine, I'm going to, and I love playing the E-flat clarinet. So E-flat for me was something that's very second nature to me. I've always been a fairly good E-flat clarinetist. So they needed somebody to play E-flat for the year at the Met. So I went and played for Ricardo, did our duets, played some excerpts for him. Next thing you know, he said, do you want to play E-flat with us? And I said, are you kidding me? Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. So that started my subbing at the Met, and that was in roughly 2000. And so I subbed at the Met and the Philharmonic for a while. But in 2003 is when I won the big job at the Met. So I remember bumping.
It was only about 3 years of freelancing.
Well, 96 to 2000.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So no, and it's funny because I remember when I first got to the Met, they had a 1-year position audition that I was runner-up to, and John Manassi got the 1-year position there. And I was all down on myself. I walked out of the audition. I'm like, oh my God, man, I came so close, and now I don't have anything. And Mark Gould, the principal trumpet player of the Met at the time, comes up to me. He goes, how long you been freelancing, kid? The guy never held any punches. And I said, oh, almost 7 years. He goes, after 7 years, if you don't get a real gig, just hang it up. And he walked away, and I went, oh my God. So I always give him a call and thank him for kicking me in the butt, because by the time that 1-year position was up and they had the full, the actual full-time position that was advertised for anybody to come and audition at the Met. I was ready. I was ready that time. I was not going to be freelancing anymore. So it was, I could hear Mark Gould's voice in my ear while I was playing, like, you hang it up if you don't win this one, man, because you had 7 years and 7 years. Because he said the same thing. He said, man, I was almost freelancing almost 7 years, and he was driving a taxi for I don't know how many years. He was driving a taxi around New York. And, you know, sometimes you have to hit that wall. And when you hit that wall, it's like, okay, I'm not going to feel this wall anymore. I'm bouncing off this wall, and I'm gonna rebound, and I'm gonna learn from these experiences. But I always tell everybody whenever they take an audition, first of all, if you think that your audition was amazing, you're out of your mind. Because there is always something you could do better. But certainly you can always learn from every single audition. It's the people that walk out of an audition and go, I don't know what else I could have done. I mean, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. They're not aware. There's something that they're not aware of. And I think that it's really important to figure out what that is, because I'm 100% convinced that if everybody figures out what they need to do, they can win a job. They can. They just have to know how to do it. And it's like you know, Olympic training. I mean, it's not how you played the day before or how you did the day after. Because I've told everybody every day after an audition, a big audition, I sound like a beginner. I mean, there's nothing I can do on the instrument that is remotely decent. It just sounds horrible. But it's because I wanted to peak at that one moment, and then my body says we've had enough. But anyway, so those are my freelance years.
Well, and how would you? I mean, these are really three very different careers in a way. You've already talked about a little bit about the Met. So how would you say, what are the pros and cons of all those periods of, you know, playing in a big opera orchestra with these 5-hour, 6-hour nights? What are the pros and cons of freelancing? I'm sure there's pros, a lot of pros.
Sure.
And of course the pros and cons of having a big principal job in a symphony. I mean, how different are they, and what are the pros and cons? How would you compare them?
Well, I'll even reiterate what you just said. I mean, to be a successful freelance musician in New York is a huge notch in the belt, and it makes you, you know, you're always. I've always said that no matter what, even if you have a job, I feel like every day. I tell everybody every day is an audition. Just look at it that way. Like you're. If you're playing for somebody else and somebody else hears you playing, they're judging you and they're listening to you, and you need to, you know, take it seriously. But I remember that at any gig I had, you show up 100% prepared, or don't take the gig. And that's tough too. Sometimes you have to say no. There were a couple times when I was subbing at the Met that was a last minute fill in, and they're like, so-and-so just got sick. Can you play Butterfly tonight? Move up and play principal. And I'm like, and with like an hour's notice, and I had to say, you know, no, I can't do that, and I'm just going to stay on second, because, you know, you got to be smart, because if you have a bad day, people tend to remember the things that you did wrong rather than all the good things that you do, and that's always a frustrating part of this job, right, of this business. But I do remember, okay, so freelancing in New York, you're always auditioning, and not only as a player, but as a person. Like, are you a team player? Are you social? Do you know the right things to say? Do you know the things you should never say when you're sitting in somebody's section? And you know, you have to be a chameleon. You got to know how to adjust, and that's also part of being a great musician, is learning the body dynamics, the different sounds people produce, how to emulate that, how to be quick, how not to be an ear sore or an eyesore. All of these things are huge. So I learned so much. And actually, I probably would say this too, that I think when young students who are very, very talented and have the ability to win an audition right out of school, sometimes that's an Achilles heel. I think if I could guarantee everybody a position in an orchestra I wish there were so many more. I would say, look, you shouldn't take that orchestral audition until you've had at least a 2 or 3 year freelance experience, because you got to learn what people. There's so much more about being a musician than just nailing an audition, right? I mean, that's a skill. It's a hell of a skill. But how do you work with other musicians? How do you listen? How do you, that maturity that I think comes with more seasoned players? Sometimes you find somebody. I mean, we're very, very lucky. I mean, our principal bassoonist and principal oboist, they're 20 years younger than me, more than that probably. They're children, but they're so mature. I mean, they're kids, but they're such beautiful musicians with great ears and great abilities, and so we got lucky, But I know that there are people out there that are too young that just nail an audition and some of them won't get tenure because they haven't developed those skills yet, those social skills, those people skills, those ears, listening. Those things are priceless, and I don't think you just get that right out of the school. I think they have to be developed.
Is it difficult? I mean, in a New York freelance situation, you might play with, I don't know how many wind sections in a year, as opposed to, you're just talking about people that have sat next to other people for 50 years, 60 years. So you're having to adjust with one bassoonist who loves to play sharp in that register, and then the next week you're playing the guy who likes to play flat, and you never get used to it in a way.
No. And I think the thing that you have to always look, you have to have a compass, and the compass says, I can go there if I have to, or I can go over here if I have to. But if everybody's like this, then sometimes you have to be the person that they need to lock into.
Right.
But you don't necessarily know when you're supposed to do that. And it certainly never happens usually in a section position. I'm talking when you're a principal, sometimes you have to be the person to lay it down to help everybody come together. The second player, and I did so much second playing and section playing, that's where you have to go this way, you go that way. It's like you're always wrong. The role of a second clarinetist is to, in my opinion, is to say, I defer. Wherever my principal player plays, that's where I go, because then the principal player, if they have good ears, they can hear, oh God, we're together, but boy, I'm way off. And then it's on you. But if everybody thinks they're right, then of course everything sounds bad. So I don't know, those things take time to figure out. And I was really fortunate because, in a lot of cases, I would be sitting second to a much more seasoned player, and they would, take me under their wing and give me some advice. Maybe, the thing I always tell second players is, please don't ever, unless we ask you, don't ever play louder than the principal player. Your sound always needs to be a part of the principal player's sound. And then it sounds like a unified, not just orally unified, but if there are moments where I don't feel comfortable where I am, like I'm like, okay, I got a cold, I can't hear very well today. I just don't, I'm not with it. Like I'm not feeling it right now. That's when I'll ask my second player, I'm going to need you to step up and just put it where you think it's supposed to be, because this piece is strange. I'm trying to figure it out. Stuff like that. But being amenable, being ready and willing and able to bend like a reed, not the ones we play on, But anyway, any way you can to accommodate everybody else on stage sometimes is one of the greatest things you can do as a musician. And it's a sacrifice. Sometimes you sacrifice half of your tone to accommodate another player. But they do notice and they are appreciative. And that's how you get the next call the next time. When the phone is, back then when the phone was ringing, now it's all email or text messages or whatever, but when the phone rang, you were happy because you were doing something right.
You actually talked about the incredible discipline that I can almost, it's almost unimaginable that at points you would say, no, As a freelancer, no, I'm not. I know this is my limits, but as a rule of thumb, I think people who live in New York, or I guess any of the big freelance towns, learn to never say no. And I'm wondering, there must be a side to you, besides having shown some discipline, there must be a side to you that it just hurts when you say no to anything. And I wonder if you're like me. And I think there's a side, from what I gather, there's a side to you that, having done that a little bit, even though it was so many decades away, a long time away, I still, there's part of me, and I'm one of these guys, I can complain about this or get jaded about that, but there's still a part of me that every time I get called to do anything, or a student calls or something, that someone still wants me to do something for 2 hours, there's still a side to me sort of like, yes, it's a win. It's still a little bit grateful after all these decades. I wonder if you have that same feeling, and I also wonder if you carry this. I know I should say no. I promised myself I'm going to say, but I just can't, because I just can't. Do you have any of that?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, there are many. I mean, I think it's probably safe to say that you're a type A personality. You're also, we have people who know you know that you're an avid tennis fan.
Yeah.
And I would probably say you're a very, very fine tennis player. So why would you play tennis if it wasn't for the love of the game and the sense of competition? It just goes hand in hand. And I mean, yes, you're going to always be critical. I mean, so look, a lot of sports are similar to what we do as musicians, which is hard for me because, like, I have so many friends who like to play golf. And a good friend of ours just gave me a whole set of clubs to take my kids out and go learn how. And I struggle with the idea of doing something else that is so similar to what I do as a clarinetist, which is, the putting yourself under a microscope to such a degree. And I mean, so the only other sport that I'll do is like weightlifting. I love it. I love it. I love how I feel. Obviously my shoulder doesn't, but I'm learning that, as I get older, I gotta find my limitations, but I still love it. And it's a competition with myself. Like, I've got these goals that I'm going to do, but like I said, you're a type of person that clearly loves the thrill of the game. And part of the thrill of the game is not saying no, right? We got to say yes. You got to take a challenge because, well, if you're being presented with a challenge, there's a purpose there, right? And I was also told that if you say no, you're quitting. So who wants to be a quitter? I mean, that means you're a loser. If you're a quitter, you're a loser. So all of that stuff, like, I hear it in the back of my head, but I'll tell you this, I hardly ever said no. The only time I said no to the Met was very, very late in my freelance career. And I think it must have been like 2002 or something. It was very, very close to the big audition. And so I also knew this. These are all these colleagues that are going to hear me play. If I go in there and I screw it up, in their mind, even though it's behind a screen all the way, that might hinder me. If I have the luck of winning the audition, I still got to get through the tenure process. And they're going to be like, that guy came in and sight read something. He didn't know the libretto. He didn't know the score. What an idiot. We don't want somebody like that. And you can be judged. Like I said, people remember the bad things that happen to you rather than the good moments, mostly. So yeah, it's like I hardly ever said no, but that's why I'm remembering this one time, and I'm like, but that was a lucky moment, I think. Because
you say no now?
Do I say no now? I say no now. Yeah, you want to know why I say no now? It's for the same reasons. I feel like the stakes are higher for me. Like, people say, well, yeah, I heard the principal clarinetist of the Chicago Symphony. Sounded like no big deal. It's boring, stupid. I think I even heard him squeak. So what's so good about that? I mean, look, people are going to trash talk. Unfortunately, I wish they wouldn't. But if people who do trash talk because they're insecure. I know that. And yet knowing that, I'm not one of those guys that's always on Facebook. I don't self-propagate. I'm not always out there. I don't have a website. I mean, I don't do this stuff. I figure I try to do the best I can every day, and I try to play the best I can. And hopefully it's never good enough for me, so why would it be good enough for anybody else? But I know that at least I try to raise the bar every time. So if anything, we're just trying to push the envelope. We're just trying to do something, beyond our usual limitations every day. So I think that, I still say no now. I mean, if I know that there have been times where there have been like some contemporary concertos that were just written. Could I come down? And it's hard also with an orchestral schedule when we were back in full swing. Sometimes, yes, I have more liberty as a symphonic player to be able to take off and do concerti and stuff like that. But I'm also, I have an expectation of, well, I'm not just going to wing something. It's got to be recording level, And that's the thing I learned a lot at the Met, because we knew that all the time those performances were being recorded. And at the time I was there, they started that whole Sirius radio. So 4 performances a week were live on Sirius every week. And so I was like, oh my God, you can't coast. There's no time to coast. So, the level was so high and the expectations just got incrementally larger each time. Then the cameras were coming in. At the time when I was there, the cameras would come in and zoom in on you when you had a solo or something. So it was like, it was a whole different level of pressure, but it made me stronger and it made me a better player, so that, by the time I was on stage with symphonic orchestras, in a way, it wasn't so shocking to me. So it's different than some other opera or orchestra jobs. The Met, because of the HD broadcast, is very much in the spotlight, and at that time the orchestra was even more in the spotlight. They would really zoom in on they don't do that anymore. It's really all about what's up on stage, and I understand that. I know that that's part of the art form, but they were finding their way, and during that time, I'd get people would write in and like, I saw you play, you were playing Tosca, or you were doing this. And I'm like, man, I didn't even think anybody could see me. It's just dark in the pit, but no, they're coming in at you and you got to be ready. And so that was a real good skill set for me to learn, is to handle that kind of pressure.
So what are some of the other differences in being in a symphony job and the Met specifically, not just an opera job, but a top opera job?
Yes, I know I ramble, so I'm like, oh yeah, you asked me that about a half hour ago.
You do. That's what,
Sorry about that. Yes, okay, so there are differences. I'll say this. Now, of course, any symphonic musician knows that you're not always the leading voice, right? We many times we're more of an ensemble voice, a tutti passage, or an accompaniment figure that is definitely not in the forefront. So you need to know the score, and you need to know what is the most prominent voice that needs to be heard. Symphonically speaking, that's very important. In opera, all the voices are more important than you, always. Unless you are by yourself playing a solo in an opera, then you can be soloistic. But most of the time, I found, like, even in a lot of the Strauss operas, even when I would practice it on my own and I have like a beautiful, beautiful solo that's just so amazing, once you're playing it in the opera, it's actually with the soprano up on stage. So no matter how you thought you want that solo to go, that's out of the question. It has to be how she sings it, and it has to be with her nuance, her sense of timing. And the beautiful thing about the Met pit is that, the pit's in the front, the singers are behind you up on stage. By the time you hear the singer, you can line up with them beautifully, as all opera pits should be. You can line up beautifully. But It's interesting for me. The hardest thing that I have to do now in a symphonic world is to line up with singers who are in the front of the stage. So when we do concertized versions of operas,
Mhm.
I actually have to watch their neck and the chest cavity expand before they sing, and then anticipate and make sure I'm not late. So I've always learned now that at the Met, um, the tendency was to come in early before the singers. And in symphonic world, it's very easy to be late, whether it's a singer or a soloist, any type of soloist in the front of the orchestra. You have to play with a sense of anticipation. Having even said that, you can go one step further and say, oh, when I need to line up with the violin section, I have to anticipate so I'm not behind. So, but every hall is different, and every orchestra is different, and the way an orchestra plays in relationship to a conductor is also very different. So all of these skill sets keep you on your toes, which is exciting, but it can also be frustrating when you hear a playback. And what I like is that I'm able to access. I wasn't able to do this at the Met, but in both I think at the Philharmonic they do it as well. You're able to access the rehearsal through the recording engineer and get an idea of, well, did that work or did that not work? So by the time you're in a performance, you pretty much know as best as possible. You've got that crystal ball. You're able to know, I figured this out and this should work. So there's hopefully less surprises in performance. So you can really be lost in the music and not worry about whether you're lining up with everybody on stage.
Is it fair? I mean, just as a distant observation, is it fair to say a lot of principals of the Met, and almost everyone I've ever talked to, like you, raves about the job and so many aspects of the job. But it's also my observation that so many people like you, given the opportunity to move to a symphony, will do so much more than the other way around. And why do you think that is?
Well, since I'm tenured and I can't hopefully I can't be fired by the Met at this moment in my life. I will say this much. I know for a fact, and it's clearly obvious if you look at it right now. Now, look, it is one of the largest non-for-profit organizations ever. And I'm not justifying them being furloughed. I think that there should have been a way to not do this to the musicians and to all of, I'm not the one balancing the books, right? But I do know that there's a lot of money involved at the Met. And I know that there's a lot of personnel involved, So, I mean, I understand, but completely furloughed, I think that's a horrible thing that has happened. Having said that, I also know that orchestra in particular are some of the greatest musicians and some of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. They don't deserve to be treated this way, but they work so hard and they're so dedicated. And part of what made the Met so special, it's not just that the art form is so beautiful and the hall is a really beautiful hall to play in. It's that everybody mattered. And I didn't feel like there were ego contests in the orchestra. I think we all felt equal. And I think that that's probably still the case there, because you spend so much time with these people. Like, it's not just the hours that you're in the pit. It's the hours that you're in rehearsal. It's the hours that you're in the cafeteria. You hardly ever see the light of day. So who you see are your colleagues, and you get to know them really well. And it becomes it's a very family-oriented work environment, which I loved. Having said that, I would definitely say that the administration is absolutely subpar. And I think that they have continuously taken advantage of these wonderful musicians. And it is no surprise to me that they are furloughed entirely because of the lack of respect, and really just they don't understand what a jewel of an orchestra they have. The chorus is absolutely fantastic. The soloists that come in are amazing, but they would be nothing without this orchestra and this chorus. That is, for me, what makes the Met so incredible. The stagehands, the way they work, the tireless, love and passion for what they do, that all just fell to the wayside when it comes to the administration. So shame on them for what they've done to these beautiful people. I really hope, I don't know how they're going to make it up to these players. As a matter of fact, I'm sure most of them are looking to try to get a job somewhere else. And that's what I'm basically telling you, is that for me personally, I did not enjoy the administration at all when I was there. I felt that they did not treat us at all with respect. And most of the time, we were treated as replaceable. So when John Ferrillo was one of the first people to leave the Met, that was a tough thing for him to do, because he loved his colleagues. And I loved my colleagues. Ricardo Morales loved his colleagues. Anthony McGill loved his colleagues. Robert Walters loved his colleagues. But I could probably say that none of them loved the administration. So I think what ended up happening was that when other orchestras, symphonic orchestras, who actually treat their musicians with a lot more care and respect, that was enticing. And when you actually felt like you mattered, it's not like they do roll out the red carpet when they actually really want you. And I felt like, wow, this is, at first I was like, no, I don't want to sit at the table with the music director at one of these functions, because that just makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, no, he wants you to sit with him. We want you to be noticed, and they would do this for at least in Chicago, they do this for all the members of the orchestra. It's not just because you're a principal player. So I began to realize, oh my God, you guys really do take good care of your musicians. You actually love us and you want to get to know us individually. That does not happen at the Met. And so I think the longing for, do I matter? That doesn't come from up above. I know it comes from the podium. I know that Yannick is a wonderful, wonderful music director, and everybody loves him, and he'll go to bat for everybody. But it takes more than that. It takes a lot more than that. So I think that's why people go to symphonic orchestras. At least that's why I know I went to the Met, left the Met, is that, you want to feel like you matter. You want to feel like you're coming in there and you're giving 120% all the time, and that, your colleagues feel it and they respect you. But, sometimes it would be nice if you felt like the higher ups who are making those grandiose paychecks actually, and it's not about the money, because we are not musicians for the money, but you want to feel respect and you want to be treated with respect. And I think that's something that the Met is going to have to learn. They certainly didn't do it when I was there, and I hope that, they're clearly not doing it now. So I really hope that they learn their lesson.
Wow, man. That very insightful words. Thanks for sharing that. What I'm going to say, it sounds incredibly naive after that, what you just said. But for me, when people were trying to figure out what is this thing going to do to the world, other than the obvious health risks, what's next? It never occurred. Like I'm going to put words in your mouth. After freelancing, after not being able to say no, blah, blah, blah. When you got that big job, as you put it, in fact, a lot of your strategies as a freelancer, it seems like, was towards getting that job and keeping it there. I think there was a culture, at least amongst American orchestral musicians, the Met. When you got into the Met, you might not be Bill Gates, you might not be, Pavarotti and that, but you were secure.
Yeah, sure.
I was floored when it was like 10 days or 12 days, and they were furloughed. And I was getting on my profound high horse. I was explaining to people, well, first the bottom people will suffer in this, and eventually it's going to be a trickle up thing. And bam, it hit the Met after 10 or 12 days. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Imagine, that was a ripple, I think, in the arts world. It was bigger than just being a musician in the world. I mean, in the orchestra. I mean, here I am on the other side of the planet, and I was, shaken up by that.
Yeah, I think it's horrible. I think it's really sad, and I think on top of it, it also it shows an incredible look. I'm not a general manager. I'm not a Peter Gelb. I'm not a Rudy Giuliani. I'm not a mayor of a city. I don't understand all the logistics. I completely admit it. So as a layperson, it's probably stupid of me to complain. But what I do think, and I knew this through all the negotiations that took place when I was at the Met, when I was just leaving the Met and going to Chicago, there was another contract negotiation going on. He would never let them see the books. He would never let anybody see what the true financial status was of the Met. So that right there was a real big red flag. And I think because of that, there obviously have been things that shouldn't have happened. And I think that, I think it's mismanagement. And I think that's a really horrible thing for such an incredible institution that has been such a landmark in the world of opera, in the world of fine arts. I mean, we all have, I thought, and I think everybody who won a job at the Met thought, I'm set for life. This is it. I mean, I know I'm going to get through and I'm going to have a beautiful retirement at the end. And I think everything is on the table now because you go, well, my gosh, they dropped the ball that quick. They couldn't even try to give them a percentage or just, a smittens, something, a pittance, anything, just give them something. It was a huge slap in the face. So I feel very, very sad for my colleagues and for everybody who works at the Met, because for everybody who does the artistic work at the Met, I feel really bad. So, yeah.
I see. Thanks a lot for that. So just going back, I mean, you've given us hints about your background, but you mentioned Germany. So just what was that all about in your training? What was it? Yeah. Well, what did you do?
I went on a Fulbright. I got a Fulbright grant. And to get a Fulbright grant, you have to have an undergraduate degree. So in my senior year at Eastman, I applied. And you go through a whole round of, there's several American rounds. And then if you keep getting through those rounds, then they send all your stuff over to whichever country you're applying for. And then there are some other rounds you go through there. But I always loved the German clarinet. I loved the sound. I loved the concept of the German system, but I never had learned it, and I always wanted to learn it. So that was the statement of my proposed study, was to go over there and to learn the German system, which I did. I spent about 6 months of my first year over there, just put the French system away and learned how to play the German system. And it was a very, very difficult thing for me to do after, I think once it's just sort of like you've ridden a bike and now somebody turns it upside down and says, okay, now ride this. It just doesn't feel right. But eventually it started to click. But I remember after the 6 months of playing it, my teacher at the time was Peter Rieckhoff. He's the professor at the HDK, the Hochschule der Künste. And he was fantastic teacher, amazing clarinetist. And he couldn't play the French system. He only played the German system. So he would demonstrate stuff on the German system, and it was always amazing. So I wanted to learn it. So I worked with him on it, and I got through about 6 months, and I finally was able to perform a couple solo pieces and a few excerpts, like for the studio class. And then when it was over, everybody's commenting, and he says, Steve, you've really gone very far, and I think you could win an audition eventually on the German system. He goes, but it's not your voice. He said, it's not really your voice, and the way that you've learned to use your air and the way that you sing, I'm not hearing it in you. And he said, you might eventually develop it. He said, but you're so advanced at the level of how you play the French system. That sounds to me like that should be your voice. So I fulfilled my requirement of learning the German system. But the crazy thing is when I went back to the French system, it was like I felt like the two worlds melded. So I felt that I had the French school, the Paris Conservatory, and then the Bonade, and everybody that went to the States. And then I had this German system. When it came together, my sound changed. But it changed for the better because I felt like I had more personality, and I felt like my ears were much more alive. So I spent 2 years in Berlin, and that was amazing. Like I learned so much. And one of the things that you have to do or you're obligated to do under the Fulbright grant is that you can't take any work anywhere else. Like you can't receive any form of payment. You live off of your stipendium, and you're a student. So that's what I did. So I had a stipendium that helped provide me my apartment. I stayed in a dorm, and all I did was study. And I would perform in chamber concerts and orchestral concerts that the school had, but mostly chamber stuff and solo stuff. And that's when I was preparing a lot for the Munich, the ARD competition for the first time. So stuff like that. Oh my God, I learned so much. And to learn another language and the culture of a country was just incredible for me. The respect. Just a student. I'm a student. I'm a nobody. I'm just somebody who likes to play the clarinet. And I remember going down the street, like in my tails, whatever, after a concert, and restaurants were closing, and they would open the door and say, "Have you had anything to eat?" And I'd say, "You're closed, right?" And they said, "Oh, come in." And they would give. I'm not just talking about one time. I'm talking about multiple restaurants would just feed me because they knew I was a musician, and they respected the art form. They knew I had no money, and they didn't care. So I learned something about the culture of Germany at that time, and I know it's probably still the same way. There's such a love and admiration for the arts. I wish it was stronger in our country, and I hope it will be after this. I really do. But I was dumbfounded when these people were just opening their doors and set a table for me and feed me. I was like, and I'd offer to pay, and they say no. And it happened so many times. I was just so blown away with that.
Do you think it'll be stronger or weaker, or the same in America?
Oh man, I don't know. I hope it's stronger because. Like everything that we're doing digitally, I know we're not satisfied. Like even, maybe with the exception of say like the digital concert hall in Berlin, but most of the stuff that I hear, or I have to give compliment to Concertgebouw as well. They sound fantastic, and they've got it. They're doing it right, but it's still not the same as having an audience, a live audience there. I know Concertgebouw is having live audiences. Maybe Berlin is starting to, but I don't think so. But having an audience, you feel the energy reciprocated from the audience to yourself and back to them. You're seeing their eyes light up when something happens that's, exceptional. That inhibition, or just giving freely to complete strangers out there, it's risk-taking, always has been. And I think
it's something that you ever took for granted. And in other words, do you appreciate an audience now differently or more or less than before? It's always been something that you understood the importance of.
Yeah, I think I always appreciated an audience, but of course I appreciate them even more now. There have been so many times now where I've gone into like a little studio and there's an engineer back there, and then there's somebody, with a mask on that comes up and is arranging the mics or whatever, and you do a streaming of a performance or something, and you're like, this doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel. So my hope and my goal is like when we come back in to the hall and we do these recordings, I just got to try to imagine there's an audience there, and it's never the same. So I hope that we're able to at least bring that aspect of live performance as best as we can. And until there's a real audience there, it's I don't think it's ever going to be the same. So no, I totally have a different appreciation for having an audience.
You know, in all these kinds of videos that we're making and stuff, I make it a point to let them know. And maybe I took it for granted too. What you mentioned, my passion for tennis. There, you know, I've seen analyses of the popularity of some famous tennis players, and the really great ones, of course, are in the zone and therefore perform whether they're being heckled or cheered. And they say those are not the popular ones. The audience wants to feel like they have a say in it, that they can get you through the match, that they can, or if they really hate you, they have some kind of power over you. It's that those guys that look at, you know, 20,000 people booing them and they say, I don't care, I'm still going to win. They don't like those people. They respect them. They don't like them. And I sometimes wonder if that doesn't apply to a classical music audience. Like, oh, there we are in our tails and a white tie, and you know we do the tuning note, we do it, and we're out the door, kind of thing. They don't have access to it. They're not even allowed to clap when they like it. You know, I mean,
yeah,
you know what I mean. And so I'm actually taking the other approach. I'm saying I wonder if they understand how important they are to us.
Yeah.
You know, and we should let them know, I think.
Yep, I did a virtual recital for the CSO, and you know, then they do an interview afterwards. So the interview was live. So, but the recording was I pre-recorded the solo repertoire. In the live Zoom interview, while they would show the piece and then they go right to me and we'd have an interview, people were allowed to chat and chime in and ask questions. And the thing that I think people were stunned, and even the interviewer said, gosh, you know, I never realized how important the audience is to you. And I said, they're the reason I'm a musician. It's that I could sit here in a practice room and play for myself all day. That is absolutely a horrific way to make music. It's not about making music anymore. It's about just regurgitating and technique, and you lose the sense of purpose. So until you're up in front sharing your soul with an audience, you don't know if you're at a risk at that moment. You don't know if you're going to reach them or if they're going to care or if you have the ability to reach an audience. And I think all of us do, because that's why we love being musicians. It's that it's so much greater than ourselves. My God, it can't be about ourselves. It has to be about making somebody, taking them to another realm, you know, just like we feel about the music, you know. And we work on this. I know we work on this with our students. We're always saying, look, I know you think you're making a crescendo there. I know you think you're saying what the composer has written. You're not even coming close. Like, you're going to have to learn to just let it all go, because that's what actually matters, is going the distance and taking those chances, taking those risks. Just putting it in the pocket. I mean, why would anybody, and I'm always amazed, because it's the really, really great listeners and lovers of classical music that go to repeat performances in a week, or will come back to hear their 150th Beethoven Fifth Symphony. I'm like, why? And I know why. I know why I love to do it, but it's because they love it just as much as I love it. And if we're able to give them that love that we have exponentially, because it has to be exponential for it to reach an audience in a 2,000, 3,000 seat hall, things have to. It's that oral art form that should wrap around you. So I always am telling my students to, please, just because you think you're saying something, what if I ask you to do twice as much? What would it sound like? Mm-hmm. And when they finally get it, it's like, look, our dynamic range has to be from impossible to impossible and everywhere in between. So like when Charlie said, you have two colors in your sound, you're the loud or you're soft. I knew I had so much more to do, and we all have to grow. And what was it, Pablo Casals that said, he's a 90, whatever. And they asked him, why do you still practice? And he goes, I think I'm getting better, I see improvement. And if we can see improvement and feel connection, not just with the music, but with the audience. That's why we play the music, is to connect with an audience. So it's that sharing, unabashed. Give everything you have. They boo you, they boo you. I miss that. I miss that at the Met. They'll boo you if they don't like you. Not the orchestra, but I mean, you hear it all the time. You're like, I paid what? And you did what? Boo, it's like, oh my gosh. So that kind of drama, I've never experienced that anywhere else. Maybe only a few times when the CSO has been on tour with Maestro Muti in Italy. And of course, we would go to all the opera houses, like La Scala. We did like 3 nights at La Scala. And he would get up there and he would turn around and somebody would shout something at him that was like, I don't know, from some village where he grew up, and there's some ongoing turmoil between them or something. I was like, wow, this is crazy. So, but you immediately you feel alive, because it's not just like a screen with faces. They're people. They're actually living people that are absorbing, and they see everything. They see everything. That's the funny thing. I didn't really get that when I was at the Met. I'm in a pit. It's dark. I'll swab my clarinet out. I'll take my reed off, whatever. I was always into music, but I move around a lot unnecessarily. When I got the job at the Chicago Symphony, there were messages coming down. It's like, why does that clarinet player keep changing his mouthpiece all the time? I'm like, oh my God, I'm not changing my mouthpiece. I'm just rewetting my reed, but it doesn't matter. Like, maybe be less of a distraction. So I'm not sure I'm good at that, but I'm trying.
This is, Steve, I always say these interviews they're like jazz solos. Sometimes the guests get a little nervous, and often they have regrets. Oh, I wanted to mention this. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I just say, look, the length of it, the direction, it's just meant to go. Today, if we did this tomorrow, it might be completely different. So actually, I had all these ways I wanted to go with you, and it's really been a pleasure going in all these directions. But I want to rein in just a few last. We'll take all the time we need. The first thing I need to do is take this to a very geeky place, because you really put me in a very uncomfortable. I've been seeing a lot of great interviews of musicians during this period, but you had one of the most uncomfortable ones for me. I'm just out there. Yeah, I'll tell you. So I know that. Well, first of all, a lot of the reasons you're later on is because I needed more daylight between the first interview with David Cooper, and also you did one later on with for clarinet, right?
Oh, right, yeah, with Richard Hawkins.
Yeah. And in it, and I was listening. It was actually a really good interview until he said, I've got this amazing reed break-in system. Okay, I mean, it's so good. It doesn't matter. My reeds last forever. And then we toured to like the heights of Mount Everest, and my reed plays just the same. And then I'm like below water, and my reed plays just the same. And anyway, it's so great. And then you say, oh, okay, well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Goodbye. Okay.
Oh, God.
You're going to document this system, okay?
Well, it's an embarrassing system because it's so simple, and that's what I'm so shocked. I'm grateful. First of all, let me say I'm grateful because in my freshman year at Eastman, my first 2 years I studied with Michael Webster,
Wait. I've got to interrupt. I'm sorry because
Oh yeah.
we're talking about all these great orchestras and what's going on, and Wenzel Fuchs gets on. Hello, my friends, and I'm about to play Brahms 4 in 2 hours. Take care.
Yes.
There it is. Okay. So
well, you know what? I'm going to be listening to that because I don't think we'll be going for another 2 hours. So
you never know, Steve. It depends
never
on
know.
the system.
You never know. But I know it's on the digital concert hall, which I subscribe to, and I am so grateful. My gosh, it is, like I said, with Concertgebouw and Berlin, I've been just, and I know Vienna has some stuff that's come out. I mean, like, it's hard because when we know what it feels like to have that orchestral sound around you, and I know that they're doing chamber versions, but not full orchestra yet, but well, Concertgebouw seems to be doing pretty big full stuff. My eyes just well up because I'm just like, oh my God, I miss that so much. But they're giving us such great performances, and it's so enriching and uplifting, and yeah. So
Okay,
I'm checking out that Brahms 4, man. I love it. Okay, so Reeds, geekdom. Here we go. First 2 years at Eastman, I had the privilege of studying with Michael Webster, who was a reed master. So Stanley Hasty taught him everything he knew. And then he went even a step further because he made his master's dissertation was on reed making. So not just from scratch, of course, because that's really what he prefers to do, but also how to work on commercial reeds. Because, not everybody wants to go out and split the cane and get the reed-to-wall machine out and work on reeds that way. I had to learn how to do all of that, and he showed me, and I was so grateful. And I was relatively successful with making reeds from scratch, but I'm not fast. I don't do any, I like to play fast, but I do not like to, I'm OCD when I'm working on reeds. So I'm always afraid I'm going to screw it up, right? So I was very, very it was so gingerly. I was just like walking on eggshells when I started to do this. And he would just go, here, this, and I'm like, wow, okay. That's like above my pay grade. I can't figure this out. I learned, and it took a while. But what I ended up learning the most or getting the most benefit from was how to work on commercial reeds. When he wrote about this in his dissertation, if you really look at the machines and the machines that Van Doren or Rico or everybody out there that has commercial reeds in development, the machines literally cut the blanks to a 1/100th of an inch, or millimeters of dimension precision. And I know that I'm not going to do that on my own. Even with a read-a-wall, I'm not going to be able to copy a reed as well. So in general, the thing that I learned, so I'll start with the process, and then I'll show you what I ended up learning on my own to add to that process. The process is so ridiculously simple. You need a plate of glass. Okay, so I know Van Doren has one, but it has like an abrasive side on one side. I completely either use the abrasive side to hold that plate of glass on my leg or on a table for friction so it stays still. You know what? If I'm going to do this, I should just show it so that you guys see what I'm talking about. I'm just going to grab my... Okay, yeah, pardon me for being off screen for just a second. I'm just going to show you. Okay. Almost ready. Okay, so here we go. And I'm not just the cheapest guy in the world, I promise you. But so many people have said, well, where do you store your reeds and how do you store your reeds? And, I have all of those beautiful reed cases. They're all like in my closet. I don't use any of them. I store my reeds like this. Cheap, embarrassingly cheap. But I'm not doing it because I'm not doing it because it looks good. I don't mind storing the reed back in the actual plastic reed case that it came in, putting it back in the box because I label the reeds. I mark them. I mark how I would position the reed on the mouthpiece, and I date them all, and I date the actual box. so I know which box am I dealing with. And then I put in one of those humidity packs, right? So this is just a massive thing, and it's like, what is it, 72% humidity. And the reason why I do that is because I can put so many boxes in there with a gigantic humidor, and it seems to balance everything out just well. I don't get things too humid or, you know, lack of humidity. It works well for me. I'll go to at least 4, maybe 6 to 7 boxes in a giant bag like this. So anyway, I look like a bag lady on stage because I pull this thing out and people are like, dude, you have a job. Like, can't you afford a food thing? And it's embarrassing because I say this, I'm like, yeah, you know, I actually like storing them in this thing. This works for me. So store your reeds any way you want, but do use a humidipack. And I usually, I sound like a checkout counter. I double bag my reeds so that they don't get punctured. Like a lot of times I may have utensils in my clarinet case and it's easy to puncture the bag. So I take the precautionary method of having 2 Ziploc bags on top of each other. Okay, here's the Van Doren, you know, plate of glass. The back on mine is completely smooth, so I don't even use the friction. You can if you want to, but I never ever touch the reed with that side. I only use the flat plate of glass. I'm gonna grab a new reed somewhere in my bag of tricks here. Okay. Yeah, this is, I know, it's really embarrassing.
I was just saying, we're lucky. I hope I get something out of this.
Okay, well, if you get anything, you'll either hate it or it'll be great. And actually, I haven't met anybody who's tried my process that didn't love it. And the one thing, look, other than playing a plastic reed, you want to feel like you've got something that's stable and reliable, something that we know typically cane reeds don't give us. So you get a brand new reed. I just took the package off. You take it out, put it on the plate of glass. I only use, if I can show it, well, you sort of can see the 600 sandpaper. And I cut them into thin strips like this. Typically when I start on a new reed, I want a fresh piece. Well, here's a fresher piece. Like I said, I wasn't that prepared to do this today, but you brought it up, so I'll do it. I'm gonna turn the camera angle down so you can see what I'm gonna do. Basically, the reed, if you do this, here, I'm gonna set up my stand so that you can see it even better. Okay, so this is geeky. I know it's really geeky. The good thing is that it's really simple. And once I do this, you hopefully will get it. And it's kind of a joke. I know a lot of clarinet players like soak their reeds, throw them in a bucket of water, and then let them sit for a month, and then they again. I don't do that. And one of the most important things that I learned from Michael Webster, you know, from the Stanley Hasty School of clarinet playing, is that the inside of a reed should never get wet, because the fibers, as we know, they swell up, and then when they dry, they shrink, and that changes the structure of the reed immediately. It's a completely different ballgame every time. Also, if you get the inside of the reed wet, you're killing the reed from the beginning. It's the kiss of death. So the only part of a reed that should be wet is the outside. So the thing that I used to use was a reed knife. So I would try to balance, and we all learned about balancing a reed with a reed knife. So you want to make the left side like the right side. You want to make the rails similar to each other. And what I found is, when I was doing that, I was making the reed substantially lighter and lighter, because of course, when you take something off a reed, it makes the reed lighter. Of course, But trying to balance a reed is under the presumption that the fibers of the reed are completely even and go straight to the tip. How many reeds do we have that do that? Hardly any. When you have them, you're lucky, and it's usually a really good reed. But most of the time, even if I pull this one out, these fibers go, let's see if you can see that, they go to the tip, but I'm trying to get more light. Where's the light? Okay, so you can see that there are moments at the tip where it thins out and some fibers go straight to the tip and then others just fizzle out before they get there. So we have a lot of inaccuracy. We have a lot of places on the reed that are lighter than others. So I just wanted to look at the fibers first, just to get an idea of what I think is going to happen when I play this thing. But the first thing I do is I take the 600 sandpaper, I hold the back of the reed. So you see this back of the reed? I want the tip to be flush. In order for the tip to be flush with the glass, I have to elevate the back of the reed a little bit. So you can see that I'm just raising the back of this. That's flat. This is raised. And now the tip, and I push down with my thumb just gently enough so that the tip is flush with the glass. Then I start to sand. The first sanding that you do will be the most substantial sanding that you do through this entire process. So you can see I'm basically going around. In my mind, I'm keeping track, and you may take about that much that much of the reed off. That's the powder that comes off. The next thing I do is I flip it over. I flip it over, I elevate the back, and I make the tip flush again. I do the same thing. So one of the things you're going to realize with sanding is that you're going to chip the reed numerous times. That's why this process of learning how to keep the tip flush is going to help you avoid that. And it's a learning curve. I turn the reed around, and now I'm going to do the back bottom half of the reed and complete the sanding process. Okay? So typically on the first sanding, you shouldn't really, you can barely see the impression and the labeling of the reed there. That by the time you get to the final stages of a performance reed, you won't even know if it's a Van Doren reed on the back. It's usually gone. So I sanded the top, I sanded the back. Now I'm going to sand the sides. Always hold the reed. Don't put the reed on the sandpaper. Hold the reed, put the sandpaper on the reed. I start from the back, I work my way up to the tip. Of course, as I get to the tip, I lighten my pressure so that I don't chip or bend the thinner part of the rail. Same thing here, I do the other side. Okay, you would think I'm done sanding, but I'm not. This is still the first stage. I'm going to sand the very bottom end of the reed. Why? Does it ever get wet? Probably not. Sometimes people submerge their entire reeds in water. That's fine when you're just getting it wet. You just dip it in the water. Don't let it sit there for more than 2 seconds. But the bottom of the reed is completely exposed. So there are open pores. Even when I'm sanding this, you can still see the holes, right? Those holes need to be gone. Because if for any reason it does get wet, it's going to go straight to the center of the reed, and then it's going to kill your reed. Your reed will start dying. You may not notice it because it feels really good at first, but it's going to live only half its shelf life. That is the first thing you do. You sand every part of the reed with 600 sandpaper. The next thing that I do is I will wet this reed. I will look at it before I wet it like I did. I'm going to study the cane fibers. The cane fibers on this one typically are pretty straight. It does shift a little bit to the left, my left. And the last thing I'll do before I wet is I will look up the rail. So I'll put a shadow on the back of the reed with the light, and I'll shine the light on the rail, and I'll take a photo picture in my mind of the shape of that rail. I'm going to do it this way. It's easier to do this in natural light rather than in, you know, incandescent or any of this stuff. So then I'll flip it over and I'll look up the other side. And I can tell you that by looking, okay, so this right side of the rail gets, let's see if I can do this, gets relatively thick towards the tip. It's hard to see it like that. The left side is much thinner towards the tip. It's hard to tell, but I can see that after, you know, years of looking at reeds. So I know that the right side, the right rail is thinner all the way to the tip as opposed to the left side, which is a thicker rail closer to the tip. So, like I said before, these fibers are bending a little bit to the left. So the left is a thicker rail and it's bending to the left, which means the left side is a heavier side of the reed. I typically now will wet this reed and I will not play it for more than 5 seconds, only in the low register. I will not go over the break. I will only play, I got 5 seconds. So my first guess of how I'm going to place this reed, I'm not going to place it directly on the center of the table of the mouthpiece, because I've already determined by looking at it that the left side is thicker than the right. So I'm going to move the left side of the reed closer into the window, and the right side of the reed is going to come off the rail of the mouthpiece on the side. So I'm basically angling the reed. This is the big difference that I developed myself. I don't use a reed knife anymore. I stopped using a reed knife about 11, 12 years ago. I was at Ravinia. Was it 11 years? Was it like 9 or 10 years ago? I was at Ravinia and I left I had a bag that had all my reed tools in it and all this stuff. It got stolen. And then I realized I didn't have time to go. I had ordered some stuff, but by the time that the reed knife came back in, I realized I didn't need the reed knife anymore. I was adjusting the reed where it wanted to vibrate its best on my mouthpiece. So from this moment on, I've never used a reed knife anymore. And I guarantee that I get at least 9 out of the 10 reeds to be performance reeds in a box.
Wow.
I guarantee.
Whoa. You're putting a lot of people out of business, man.
I know. I love my colleagues at Van Doren, and they don't like this process because
wow, man.
I know that. I mean, look, the thing is, I think it's.
Hold on. Don't you continue with it like the next?
I am. Yes, there's more.
Sorry. Yeah.
So let me tell you right now. Once you do this process, you re-wet the reed for the very first time. You're going to wet it, play for 5 seconds in the low register. Typically, this very first sanding, the reed is going to feel so freaking unbelievably fantastic that you're just going to want to keep playing more than 5 seconds. Don't do that. Do not do that. You're going to kill the reed. You're just going to waterlog the reed. Never waterlog a reed. Once you do for 5 seconds, you got to let this thing completely dry out all the way through. I go through 2 boxes of reeds at a time. So by the time I'm finished with this first sanding on the last reed of the second box, I'm ready to go back to this one again. Now, if I'm lucky enough and I played that reed and it worked much better playing it off the right side of the mouthpiece, I will then draw a little arc, like a little arrow going like this. Okay, hold on. I actually am a good musician. I have a pencil. Just had to find it. So I'll do that. I'll draw an arrow going that way. So that means that, and I'll also do this. I'll shade this right corner. You see that bottom part that I just shaded right there? That also means that I'm going to play it off the side of the mouthpiece. So there have been times when I'll play a reed where there will be, you know, you can see into the mouthpiece. There are times when the reed will be like this, or like this, or like that. And I can see into the actual chamber. I don't really care. What matters is if it vibrates well and it's saying all that it needs to say, that's where that reed wants to be on my mouthpiece. Now, everybody's mouthpieces are different, but you're going to find in general that typically one side of a mouthpiece is a little bit more open than another. Even on the most balanced facings that we have, they're not perfectly balanced. There's a slight indifference. And usually for me, the left side is a wider, it has more space. It's a deeper vibration, and it needs to, you know, it's a wider facing. Let me put it that way. But that's on mine. And most of the time I like to play my reeds off of that left side so I get a little bit more vibration. But it all depends on the fibers of the reed and the size of the rails. So instead of trying to balance the stronger left rail to match the right rail that was thinner, I don't want to take anything off this reed. I'm already sanding it, so I'm making it, you know, it is getting thinner, but at the most minimum amount. I don't want to do more than I have to, and I want to take the least amount off this reed as possible. So we go to the second stage. The second stage, I'm going to do exactly what I did the first time. I'm going to sand every single part that I just did. Will I use the same amount of finger pressure? No, I'm going to get lighter with each sanding. But I'm going to take off not as much powder as I did the first time, but, you know, a little bit more. I will do a process of this. I won't, and I'll still play the low register. For the first 4 to 5 sandings, I will not go over the break. The only thing that changes is that I double the playing time with each sanding. So first 5 seconds, next 10, next 20, next 40, you know, 80 seconds. By the time I'm in that 80-second range, then I'll start to go over the break. But like I said, I go through 2 boxes. By the time I'm done with that second box, that first reed is dry. You could probably get this process done in a day to 2 days max.
Huh.
If you're letting them dry, some people like to dry them with a lamp, you know, a heat lamp or something. Don't do that. That's putting extra stress on the reed. I find it's better to just let them air dry. Just, you know, naturally let them dry on their own, and then you're ready for the next process. After you're done with that 5th sanding, you're getting to know more about this reed. Like, okay, maybe it doesn't like to be played askew. Maybe it likes to be played more completely off one side. You'll figure that out. But the real test is look at the rails and look at the fibers. The fibers, sometimes if a fibers go like completely this way, I'm going to play my reed completely this way. So that the middle part of wherever the majority of the fibers go, that's the new heart of the reed. That's the new center. The problem with people trying to make a reed balance today is that they're taking the center, metrically the center of the reed, and saying that's the center of the reed. The fibers determine the center of the reed. So there's the big difference. And that's why I don't use a knife anymore. I found that I don't need to use the knife. There may be rare occasions where I would use a knife, and that's only if the low register, no matter after. So what happens when you sand these reeds, you get so much clarity in the reed immediately. You know how we hate playing new reeds because it sounds like an air conditioner is on at the same time, or that like a vacuum cleaner is going, you know, like you're in a desert. It's just horrible. We hate that feeling, and we hate the roughness of the new reeds, right? So you're sanding it, you get the smoothness of the reed already. And why do we love our best reeds? Our best reeds feel so smooth and broken in. We're doing that process from the beginning. So when a reed is absolutely performance ready, sometimes I might go 7, 8, even 9 sandings. Sometimes I'm in that 6th sanding and I'm like, this is prime time reed. This is fantastic. And now I'm just going to baby it. I will polish it with just paper and pressure, just making sure that this area, every area of the reed is completely smooth, so that when the reed is wet, it should feel as smooth as the bark. That's when you know you have a performance reed. When it's as smooth as the bark when it's wet, because as soon as you sand this and you wet it, you can still feel the the friction, you can feel the roughness of the reed. It's definitely a lot better than a reed right out of the box. And they feel so much better from the beginning. They sound better, they feel better. What you're trying to do is you're trying to tell this reed that over a period of 5 to maybe 9 sandings, you are going to stabilize this reed from being a sponge to now something that is impenetrable with water. All that saliva or water does is just coat the outside of the reed so that it vibrates in the way it wants to, right? But once the inside of a reed gets wet, you're kissing that reed goodbye. It might get you through maybe a 30-minute piece, and then you can never use that thing again. It's like you just throw it away, right? My reeds will last from anywhere from 2 to 3 months. And I'm talking straight, full out, hour and a half, Mahler symphony, no problem. Now, I play a 5. I play a very, very strong reed. But I encourage whoever does this process, go a half a strength harder than you normally do, because you'll find that you're still taking something off the reed. So, I mean, if these could go in quarter strengths, that would be perfect, because you really are only taking about a quarter of a strength of the reed away. So even though I play a 5, I would venture to say it's a 4 3/4, or 4.5. But it works for me. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't matter what mouthpiece I play. I play on a pine that I've had made for me. It's my own mouthpiece. But it's modeled after my favorite pine that I had when I won the Met, and when all of my auditions that I did, the big jobs. But the thing is, the crazy thing about me, and I think it's because of this reed preparation, I've always used the same strength reed on different facings of different mouthpieces. It's just weird. I don't know why it works for me, but I have a feeling it will work for anybody. I think everybody thinks, you've got to find that great mouthpiece. Absolutely. It's one of the most important parts of being a clarinetist. But people forget that the reed is equally, if not more important than the mouthpiece. So if we learn to find stability in a reed, which is why people are gravitating towards the plastic reeds, right? Oh, they still do change. I mean, they will change after about 2 or 3 months. They'll get weaker. I still don't think they sound better than a real reed. Like I said, I love all different types of clarinet playing. But for me personally, what I need in the orchestra and what I feel I can do dynamically, whether I'm playing chamber, solo, or orchestral repertoire, I like this clarity and built-in resistance that I have with my setup. I know, I do use a lot of air, but you do too, Andy. I've seen you play. I've heard you play. You've got a hell of a lung capacity, and you use your air, and that's why you have a huge dynamic range. I mean, we all know we're wind players first and foremost, so we have strength training over all these years to develop strong lung capacity and the way to use our air in many, many, many different ways. But I guarantee when you're playing a Brahms symphony, you're not going to put that light reed on. You're going to put the hefty reed on, and you're going to work hard, and you're going to get that deep, rich sound that is even in all the registers. And that, to me, is reed work more than, I could do that on pretty much any mouthpiece if I wanted to. But I could not do that if I didn't do this reed work that I have. So actually, after that 5th or 6th sanding, you can start to go into the clarion register. I never even test anything above high, just thumb C. I don't, because I think that once you start playing in the stratosphere of the clarinet, you're putting undue stress on that reed. When it's performance ready, it says, yeah, give it. I'm ready. I'll take whatever you have to give me. But it's crazy. 9 out of 10 in a box. There's always one ridiculous reed that, or stop, right? I wouldn't pick my teeth with this reed, right? But there's always one. They got to shake it up a little bit, right? They can't do everything that's great. But I really do believe this. I don't think that Van Doren has done anything wrong. I think they have given us great reeds. We just didn't know what to do with them. And that's, it's profitable for them, but at the same time, it's a disadvantage for us. And once you learn, look, I don't need to use many reeds in the season. I don't go through many, many boxes of reeds. But I I love finding a newer read. So I have to force myself. My reads still feel good, but about like 2 months, I'll be like, come on, man. So I always work on reads. It's like I always work on reads. I have to at least force myself at least once a week to get a new batch going. When I get to them and when I'm actually using them in performance is a totally different story. I mean, I must have 15, 20 of these that are all performance reads. They're just there. They're fun. I pull them out whenever I want. I'm always surprised too. And save your reads. Honestly, if you polish them like I'm telling you, save them, because when the whole like seasons change and now you're in the middle of winter, you'll be surprised. You could pull reads out that were, from last October or something, or from a year ago. And because I rotate all the time. I mean, why would I kill one read when I can just let them all enjoy the performance time? They last a long time. And those reads I'll take all the way up, like if I'm playing up at Aspen or Vail or whatever in the mountains, they don't change. They don't change. Maybe I don't get through the longer phrases like I would like to, but that's me. That's not the read. That's my lung capacity isn't as good up there because there's less oxygen. But the read feels the same.
Great, man. Wow. Yes, applause. Excellent,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it sounds good. I hope it works. It works for me. It's worked for a lot of people that I've worked with, students and professionals. But, it's so simple. It's ridiculously simple. And that's what's so sad. It's like, okay, once you get it, dude, like life is a lot easier when you're not stressed out about reads.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
We'll see. Right? So far,
right. I really hope
but all this time I was spending my time seeing a shrink when I should have been just asking you about.
Hey, maybe you can get the money back. I don't know. Give him a clarinet lesson and then teach him how to make a reed. Maybe he'll get
Listen, see, that's great. One, we're just going to ask you what we're asking everyone. Quick advice to young people, especially in this period of time. Life advice, clarinet advice, COVID, getting through COVID advice, non-COVID advice. What are your words of wisdom, and hopefully a little bit of optimism?
Yes. Okay. I do have optimism. I do. I know it didn't sound like I did before, but it's true. I do.
By the way, you're such a good salesman. Esteban said he's going to try it.
Oh,
his trumpet.
All right. Hey, you never know.
Anyway, go ahead.
Sandpaper on his mouthpiece. Could you see that? Oh my God.
But yeah, Esteban wants to hear your advice. Come on, Steve.
Okay, my advice is this. My advice is to musicians, of course, because why would I give advice to anybody else? I'm not good at anything else. But I would say this. Please don't use COVID as an opportunity to isolate yourself more. Because I think what ends up happening is we think that, okay, well, all I'm going to do is just practice a lot now. And I don't think anybody, if you're practicing correctly, I don't think anybody should practice more than 2 hours, period. I think that you're going to do a lot of damage. You're going to learn bad habits. You're going to practice stuttering. You're probably not really thinking through the music. And you're going to end up creating, you could hurt yourself too. I mean, I honestly, if you play like the way I play or like Andy plays, I mean, if you play for 2 hours straight, you should be really tired. I mean, it shouldn't just be, and I totally don't agree with people putting on light reads so that they can practice longer. I don't do that. And the reason why I don't do that is because I want whatever I play to always feel the same, which is why I'm a big advocate of stability in reads and proper reed work. When I say don't practice for more than 2 hours, okay, I mean your technical practicing. I mean actually physically playing the clarinet. That doesn't mean that I don't go and work on reeds. And as you can tell, you can do other things while working on reeds. You can watch podcasts, you can, books on tape, you can do whatever you want to do. You can, you can engage in conversation with whomever you have the fortune of being quarantined with. But the truth is, I don't think it's a good idea to go so inward that you start to hurt yourself in the process. Because I know I did in the beginning. I did. In the beginning, I was like, oh man, I'm on the Crigliano Concerto. I'm practicing Nielsen. I've got these Bach, sonatas I'm working on. And after a while, I was like, I am so tired. My brain hurts. I can't do this. I can't keep this up. So I don't keep that up. What I do keep up is really, really good read work. 2 hours of practicing. If I can't accomplish, and setting a goal for 2 hours, don't try to say I'm going to learn every orchestral excerpt known to man in my practice session today. And if you're going to do it right anyway, you shouldn't do more than 4 or 5 excerpts if you're really going to start delving deep into that stuff. So the physical practicing, no more than 2 hours. Listening to great recordings, listening to the digital concert hall, the live music right now, and seeing what our colleagues across the globe are doing to enrich people's lives, getting motivated like that. Get out of your apartment, your home, wherever you're staying, get outside. Winter's coming. So, some people love to ski, and that's great. I'm not one of them. So I like the sunny weather. So I want to be outside as much as I can, which doesn't happen that often in Chicago. So I want to enjoy nature. I want to get outside. I want to, I think it's important to also pick up some other form of physical activity, because yes, I know it's very physical what we do to play the clarinet, but that is not going to keep you physically in shape. So do something else that is active and a form of cardiovascular exercise that keeps you healthy, clears your mind, revitalizes you. Next thing you know, you're coming back in and you're playing better than you ever have. So I think being smart and not overdoing things. You can do anything you want in excess. And I don't think there's ever a good situation when you do anything in excess. So moderation, be smart, try your best to get outside. That's all I can say.
Fantastic. Great. Steve, so John Ye was a little bit worried that you were going to break the record. I think he's at 3 hours and 1 minute. You're at 2 hours.
I'm not looking to break any records. I'm done with that stuff, man. I'm done with that. I just happy to talk to you guys, but obviously you have a question, I'll talk. I have no problem.
No, I think you've been. This is just perfect. We're gonna thank you tremendously for like a really informative talk. This was really great. We're just hearing about the orchestra world at this time, about the music school or the university world. Read tips on just getting your playing as good as possible, especially during this taxing time. All your stories and everything. It was really, really superb interview, and it's really fantastic to come full circle. 17 interviews later, all instigated by you, man. So
dude, you did this. I didn't do anything. I was just a pawn in Game of Life, man.
But it was a good interview. Otherwise, I wouldn't have wanted to do something like this. So, and this was a great interview. So, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next week.
All the best. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you, Lorenzo. Take care.